Hey, Greg, it's you every time, bud. You're always the first one in the door. As I was just saying, you're the one who just like seems to you just sit down at 6 o'clock, eh? And you're just like refresh. Oh, that's nice. It's good to be the first one. Congratulations. How's your day going, bud? How's it going for you? Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I'm just doing Imgur for a little moment here, just to see if we get any viewers. Like, if we get, even if we get like 5 people, I'll probably start just doing the Reddit stuff. But for now, we can faff about a little bit on Imgur, have some fun, dumb. Oh, this isn't dumb. These are actually really nice. Oh, a serious injury. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry to hear that, bud. That sucks. Glad to hear you'll be fine. Hope you're recovering nicely. Hello, whoever just popped on. Oh man, if I had some kind of serious injury, I'd just milk the crap out of it. I'd always be like, "Oh, can you pass me that thing?" I would get it myself, but I'm seriously injured. Been watching too much Family Guy. That's such a stupid Family Guy thing. Chuck Norris versus communism. Well. Well, I think the first thing I'll show off here is here on Imgur, and we're starting to see there is like this bleed. There's a bleed happening from there's a bleed happening into all of our daily lives, right? Like everything is becoming politicized, and you can't escape it any longer, right? Even if you go to your like traditional, like where you find your cat videos and all this kind of stuff, like a place like Imgur is like it's for faff, right? And we are starting to see more and more that like everything is starting to bleed into these media outlets, and everything's starting to bleed into these kinds of things. And here's this story of the gas shortages we've been talking about. It was actually this chat yesterday that started talking about it, and now I'm starting to see it everywhere, right? Where people are going to gas stations and just loading up. Somebody's put gas into a plastic bag. Like, what the hell? The government has 6 months fuel reserves. Will be fine until November. That's not good news, bud. Like, that's not a lot of reserves, right? Like, this is something that's going to become more common because fuel is a finite resource. We've known it this whole time, right? Like, there's a big reason why the United States is invading, just ruthlessly invading lots of places. And it's just going to get to the point where like oil and fuel and these sorts of things are just not going to be, it's going to cost us more fuel to get it than it will be, than we'll get from doing the process. And like, and this is going to be like in our lifetime for sure. Like, we are for sure going to see this happen, where people will just simply not be able to afford the gas, right? Like, that the gas will just become so unaffordable that it will become affordable once again to like have horses, right? Like, it'll just be affordable again to go back to those sort of old practices, and you know, skills that were kind of they're around but they're on the back burner are going to become very important again once again, like animal husbandry, you know, being able to keep cattle, right? Like being able to keep horses, right? These things are going to become common again, and we are just going to run out of fuel, and we're not going to make the transition to like electric cars. Like the transition from fuel from fossil fuel cars into electric cars, like that's not going to happen, right? Like we're barely even beginning to address the idea that we shouldn't have. And a lot of these people, like these guys know, right? They know, so they're stocking up on the fuel while it's somewhat affordable right now, right? And they're doing it in, the ways that they can, right? Filling up buckets, water barrels, right? Just getting as many jerry cans as you can, right? And like it is causing shortages. Just the act of doing this causes shortages, right? Like you cause runs on a commodity, and it causes the problems, right? But we're going to see it more and more. We're going to see it more and more and more. It's going to happen more and more and more. And we're going to have to find solutions to that. Here's another one that I saw. We won't be bouncing back. The unsettling truth about the reopening. Like, this is surrounding the arts, right? Here's an interview with Andrew Lloyd Webber. And they're just talking about how, like, there's no bounce back coming, right? And that, like, because we don't subsidize our arts at all, like, we have such a bad culture here in the West. And, like, my background is in theater, right? And so I've seen this whole time, like, it's the only reason there is an artistic scene here in the West at all is because people want it. That the people who are participating in it and the people who are trying to make it go and the people who are trying to make a living doing it, right? They have a passion to do that. That's the reason they're here, is to do this thing. And they're not able, most people aren't able to make a living doing it. Like if you can't get in as a regular gig in like the symphony that exists in your city or the ballet, or like if you can't get into the, Andrew Lloyd Webber show, right? Like if you're not doing Cats or Phantom or something, right? Like you're just not going to be genuinely part of the cultural scene. You're just going to end up working at Starbucks, right? And that's where all our creative people are. That's where all our artists are. All our artists are working at Starbucks right now, right? Like they're not working on their craft. They're not working on their art. They're not working on any of that kind of stuff. Like, I mean, they're trying to. They're trying to. God bless them. But like, they're not really getting paid for it. And then the art scene is so weird because it's one of those things where, because it's such a narrow field, if you that there's like a couple of people, like a small group of people who are making millions and millions and millions of dollars doing it. But most people are just like in this constant grind of trying to get anything done. And because we don't subsidize our artistic scene, right? We've had to shut these places down, and like it's going to cause an enormous problem. Like a lot of these, like the museums and the theaters and all these places, like they may not open, right? Yeah, 50% of shops that closed during COVID won't reopen. Derby is not the place it used to be. Yeah. And once you reopen, it's going to be like this slow, steady kind of, and like people aren't going to trust them. Like I know I don't like want to just go to like a little tiny shop. Like I'm not interested in going knick-knacking, well. Woman with BLM in her bio, unsure where she stands on ethnic cleansing in Palestine. Yeah. What is this from? Reductress? That's hilarious. I need to look into that. Ontario May 12th update. Still above 2,000 cases. Yeah, I wouldn't say that we would want to be reopening until we're at least below 1,000. Well, we'll see. We'll see. COVID is this ongoing, never-ending, ridiculous sea of total, complete nonsense. So, we'll see. Oh, Technically, the show is now actually live. Yeah, and all the viewers are zooming on right now. Hey guys, how you doing? This is the Canadian Commie here to deliver you today's news. How you guys all doing out there? Bye-bye. The game I like to play, Heroes of the Storm, is finally updating. It's been 4 months. Big news. Yeah, if you'll remember yesterday, I was talking about Israel. Good excuse to bring up a map. Good excuse to bring up the map. I love to look at the map. Good excuse to look at the map. That's my map song, right? If you were here yesterday, you were looking at this, and I was talking about Israel and its position and the kind of thing. And here's a quote immediately coming out of BreadTube. Joe Biden, $3 billion a year to Israel is the best investment America makes. If Israel didn't exist, America would have to invent an Israel to protect America's interests in the regions, right? And this is said, he's quite young here. What the heck is up with his hair? Did Joe Biden used to be bald? I didn't know this about Joe Biden. Did Joe Biden used to be bald? Hold on. Joe Biden bald? Oh no, it's just like really, really blonde. No, he's pretty bald. Yeah. Yeah, this is the same thing that happened to my brother and my dad, actually, when they were 18. Don't know what you're on, but I want some. It's tea. Just beautiful, glorious tea. That's all. Well, and also, Ruth, I just moved into this space, literally 5 days ago now. It hasn't been that long. And I'm moving from an apartment that literally I couldn't put my hand above my head. It would go this far. And that would be it, if I was standing, of course. And so now I've got this space, and so I just spend my time walking around the space, and I'm doing cartwheels and shit in here. So I'm feeling my mood is well elevated for that reason whatsoever. Anyway, so here's Joe Biden just admitting outright that the reason why we are investing into Israel is because it gives us a secure foothold in the region. Right? It's a beautiful connection to the Mediterranean Sea, right? You can get whatever you want in through the Mediterranean Sea. You don't need to deal with these African nations or anything like this. You funnel everything you need into Jerusalem, and that lets you funnel whatever you want into Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Syria, right? Iraq. It's a beautiful foothold, right? And here's Joe Biden, current president of the United States, affirming that, right? So people lose their minds about Israel, and it becomes a big religious conversation, or it becomes this about anti-Semitism or something like this. My view is that Israel is a military base for the United States Empire. That's what it's always been. And that any discussion outside of that is just mere distraction. Capitalists love to say competition breeds innovation until they have to compete for our labor. Yeah. Well, I mean, it is going to breed innovation, and the innovation is going to be what capitalists always do, right? It's going to be major propaganda campaigns through places like the New York Times and the Washington Post, right? They're going to do enormous, large-scale propaganda campaigns in order to guilt people or fearmonger people to accept low-wage slave labor jobs, right? That's what they're going to try to do. And because they're going to try to get things back to normal, as if that's something that we can actually do. Since we're talking about Confederates/Nazis in Alberta, I'm reposting this picture I took in Edmonton last summer. They're in the cities too. Oh, yikes. Yikes, 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 yikes. In Edmonton? That's heartbreaking to hear. That makes it extra stupid, don't you think? Doesn't it make it extra dumb that there's someone in Edmonton, Canada, right? Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, flying a Confederate flag? That makes it extra racist, I think. Because, it's not even our racism. You can't even fall back onto like, this is the history of, this is my history. Like, no, it's not. You're in Canada. Like you had nothing to do with the Confederacy, right? Like, what the hell? So to me, this just makes it like extra racist. Get rid of this. Get rid of this trash, man. Like these people, like if you're openly flying a Confederate flag and pretending as though that's okay to do, like, yeah, we should arrest you. I don't have any problem saying that. Like my grandparents went to war to kill Nazis. Like we fought a civil war to fight these guys. No, you don't just get to fly this stuff. It's not a freedom of speech issue, right? Get rid of these losers. Let's make shooting these guys normal again. I don't understand why it's not. Yeah, here's more of the gas shortage. Now, I've seen something that says the gas shortage there's like 150,000 gas stations, and only 1,000 of them are reporting shortages, and most of those shortages can be attributed to panic buying. But there is also like a pretty good degree of like we are going to run out of fuel eventually. I was saying that earlier. So sad. I have family there, Alberta. Yeah, I won't bring it up, but I really think about this for the last 20 plus years. Yeah. I have family in Alberta as well, and when I get to talking to them, I don't bother talking about it. I know what their position is on a lot of this stuff, and you got to be, when you're talking directly to these people, like you gotta be a bit softer, right? You got to get through like a lot of cultural propaganda. Like Alberta is, in my view, hilarious, right? They're all about rugged individualism, and they're all about like their anti-government handouts. But everybody in Alberta, especially the rural farmers, like the real conservative types who are like, government handouts are bad and all this kind of stuff. Well, the reason they have their land in the first place is because of something called the Canada Dominion Act, where when we were all colonizing this place, like when white Europeans were colonizing this place, you as a white British man specifically, were allowed to go to the prairies, and the Canadian government would just give you 360 acres of free land. Like, you had to pay like $10 to apply for the program in the first place. But outside of that, go to Alberta, settle, you get 360 acres of free land. This is the largest government handout in the history of the nation that was exclusively given to white British men. And then what do those white British men do? They give the land to their sons, who then in turn give the land to their sons, right? So anybody who tells me that there's no such thing as systemic racism in Canada, you are a Holocaust denier. The Canada Dominion Act alone shows that's the case. And what's so funny about modern day conservatism and modern day Albertans is that they are the primary beneficiaries of the largest government handout in the history of the nation, while simultaneously telling everybody how bad government handouts are. Like, it's hypocrisy down to the basic level. Like, these guys are walking around on land that was given to them for free. Like, shut up with your rugged individualism and your I did it myself and just pull yourself up and all this kind of bullshit. You're literally standing on land that was given to you for free. So, how can people vote for a party that has to hide their leader because he's so unpopular? Because conservatism is a death cult, right? Like, conservatism is a death cult. They're not thinking rationally. They're worshiping. Hey, buddy, you want some more peanut butter? Like, people like Doug Ford because he is like got that man of the people sort of aspect, right? Like, people aren't voting for an expert, right? If anything, people are kind of tired of the experts, right? People are being tired of being told what to think. And they're in this real period of time where they're like, well, this is what I think, and what I think is just as valid. And it kind of goes back to that old phrase that I use all the time of like, these guys just think that their ignorance is as valid as our knowledge, right? and that somebody who spends their whole life studying something is the same as some guy who gets his news from like Alex Jones or something, right? Like that these two are supposed to be considered equivalent. And we're seeing what that means right now. And it means that you get guys like Doug Ford who are abandoning the populace and just are total frauds. A good reminder, Palestine and Israel are in conflict. What is happening is Palestine is in Palestine is settler colonialism, military occupation, land theft, and ethnic cleansing. A conflict means there is equal footing, which is not the case. There is an active oppressor and an oppressed. Yep. I said it yesterday, but I'm just seeing more about this conflict more recently. And nobody's actually given me a theory as to why that's the case. I just think it's interesting that suddenly now there's this big upswing of this kind of talk. So I don't know what that is, and I'm curious to know what the story is. Yeah, pretty extraordinary. Premier Ford is no longer delivering good news. Yeah, he knows that people just don't want to see him. People aren't interested in seeing this guy. Fuck Doug Ford, yeah. Damn, if only a certain apartheid state had the power to end this unimaginable hostility. Yeah, Gal Gadot. No. Pretty slow news day again here. I think maybe that has something to do with why people are Oh, dude, do you guys remember the Raptors win? If you're living here in Toronto, when the Raptors actually won and became the champs, the streets just got full. I'll never forget it. I actually walked out of the I walked out of my buddy's apartment, and we got onto the street, and there were literally little children. This is 11 o'clock. There was piles of people on the main intersection and just celebrating and losing their minds, and cars are honking, all this kind of stuff. And I'll never forget there were these little kids running around not wearing shirts, and I was looking around. I'm like, do these little kids have parents? Is there parental supervision? And it just was doesn't that indicate total chaos to you? The idea that there's just random children not wearing shirts and they're just running around a street filled with shouting people. That's chaos to me. And it really showed me right then. It was we could strip the artifice of this whole thing down immediately. When the Raptors won, we all just took to the streets, and it became this massive cultural moment. We could do that again for lots of other reasons. That's kind of what I suggest. Israeli lynch mobs are attacking a mosque in Lydda while Palestinians try to fend them off. It's got to be that there's just a lot of action going on in that region, right? And people are really, really reporting on it right now. Ugh. It's there were people running around a condo development. Yeah, man. It was chaos. That's hilarious. Convincing people to grab a whole bunch of shit. Hilarious. Your tax dollars at work. Aftermath of Hamas rocket attack on Israel. Aftermath of Israeli rocket attack on Gaza. Corporate needs you to find the difference between this picture and this picture. America. They're the same picture. Ho ho ho. Oh, yeah. It just really does seem like the Israeli conflict must just be really super heating up right now, you know? It's got to be that there's a lot of action, there's a lot of stuff, and it seems also there isn't much else going on in terms of news, and probably also a little bit that underneath Trump, talking about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict was pointless, right? There's just no reason to bother. The Republicans are not going to do anything about any of this. They're not even going to attempt. They're not even going to try. They're not even going to run a propaganda campaign to try to convince anybody that they actually give a crap. Like, the Republicans treat Israel for what it is, which is a military base, right? Like, that's what they'll go to, like, any of the lobbying groups and say whatever, right? They'll read a card and do whatever, but they're not actually gonna try to soothe any kind of. They're not interested in doing diplomacy. They're not going to do any of that. Whereas now, I guess with Biden in, it's like maybe there is the hope that we could actually stop some of this ridiculousness. And so when something happens, people actually talk about it now. Maybe that's what's going on. I can't really put my finger on why it is. It just seems that the right now, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is what's taking the forefront. Benjamin Netanyahu is holding on to power. Yeah, he's never going to give power up, dude. Like, he's never, like, that's not going to happen. Like I said, like, it's a military base, right? Like, he considers himself, like, the king of this military base. Ontario Nurses Association appalled as Ford government continues to fight pay equity maintenance to the Supreme Court of Canada. Yeah, like, this, Doug Ford's a piece of shit, like we all know. Has been urging the Ford government and for-profit nursing homes to end their battle against female-dominated healthcare professionals. What specifically? Have appealed a recent decision in an effort to deny pay equity maintenance to long-term care home registered nurses and healthcare professionals. Yeah, they want the wages to be zero, right? They want the wages to be zero, and they'll find any way they can make the wages to be zero. Like, one of the big reasons why a lot of these long-term care homes got infected with COVID, and I reported on this as it happened, but one of the big reasons these long-term care homes got infected is because the workers who are being paid a minimum wage, right? They're part-time workers being paid a minimum wage. Don't hire actual nurses. Don't hire any of these people and pay them a decent wage. So you got part-time workers, and then and they're not being paid enough. So you know where they live? The shelters. So you had these people who were living in shelters, leaving the shelter, and then going to work in a long-term care home. What do you think's going to happen, right? And they're taking the transit too. Like, what do you think's going to happen, right? So this privatized healthcare, this privatized long-term care system is officially evil. Like, it's officially evil. Ruth, we can't do too many things at once. Imagine having to see more than one problem in the world. Way back, this was normal, 6 p.m. news. Yeah, I just think it's interesting, Ruth, because I think it just hasn't been in the news, right? The Israeli-Palestinian conflict has just not been part of the news cycle at all. And maybe that does have to do with the Trump administration, Biden administration. Greg, you're saying search for the video. Joe Biden says if Israel didn't exist, the U.S. would have to invent one. I actually just showed that. It's right at the top of this page. It's one of the first things that, there it is. Right?
The United States, we look at the Middle East. I think it's about time we stop, those of us who support, as most of us do, Israel in this body, for apologizing for our support for Israel. There's no apology to be made. None. It is the best $3 billion investment we make. Whether or not in Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interest in the region. The United States would have to go out and invent an Israel.
Unity. There's your unity candidate right there. I saw an article showing photos of the food in long-term care homes and it would make you sick. Yeah, bud. Yeah, bud. Like, it's unacceptable. Like, it's beyond unacceptable, right? Like, it's at this point you have to call it, like, purposeful, sycophantic. The cruelty is the point, right? Like, they're not trying to help. They're trying to grift us all, and they're trying to make the system worse, right? They're trying to make the system worse so that they can funnel the surplus money into their own pockets, right? They don't care if these old people suffer. They don't care if we suffer when we end up in these long-term care homes. They don't care about any of that, right? They care about the passive income that it makes them, right? And and the whole, like, privatization versus nationalization argument in the long-term care homes, it can't be more black and white, right? The military is the one that's actually doing the legwork on this, right? They're releasing all kinds of documents, and they're showing that the long-term care homes that are nationally owned and nationally run have better outcomes in every category except one, which is making worthless parasites like Doug Ford rich, right? Like, so if you can stomach the idea that worthless parasites like Doug Ford won't make extra money from the suffering of our elderly, then you should be fighting for the nationalization of the long-term care homes, and we just. I'm just going to keep pounding on that pulpit until probably the day I die. Probably until the day I die. Click. Put that light on. Israel posts fake video to justify Gaza slaughter. Yeah, honestly, you can go to Jerusalem and newscasters, Abby Martin, who is, first of all, absolutely gorgeous, and I'm deeply in love with her, and if I could even just be in the same space as Abby Martin for just like a minute, I would be like, that's wonderful. She's also an enormously powerful journalist and reporter, and she went into Jerusalem and just started asking people about the Palestinian, what the situation was with the Palestinians, and what she got back was just like open, overt, normalized racism. That the people of Jerusalem were just like, yeah, Palestinians are garbage, right? Get rid of these guys, right? We should slaughter all of them, right? And it was just like casual conversation that was being had on the streets of Jerusalem. So yeah. It's a really, really serious thing that's going on. A fourth stimulus bill could be coming. Will a check be included? Probably not. Probably not. Right? America is in free fall collapse. It's collapsing into neo-feudalism. It's probably already there, honestly. No, we need a basic income. Like, forget these individualized stimulus bills and all this kind of stuff, right? We need a systemic system that gets money into people's pockets as a starter. And if your culture isn't starting to have that conversation, hey, Juliet, how you doing? Glad you're here. But if your culture isn't at least having the conversation about whether or not a basic income should be the thing, and if these aren't the serious conversations that are happening, then I think your culture is in serious trouble, and then that would be the American culture for sure. These guys are debating whether or not it's appropriate to give like single mothers, a pay. Yeah. Inflation surges in April as consumer prices leap. Yeah. I mean, what the Americans have done is they've printed, like at the start of the pandemic, they printed like $5 trillion, right? And then they took that $5 trillion and just gave it to corporations. And what do corporations do? They jam it into offshore accounts. They do stock buybacks. They do all the worthless stuff that's pointless for an economy that doesn't actually help anybody. But the printing of the money means that your economy inflates, right? And if you wanted to combat that, you would have to tax money, but that would make the printing of the money pointless in the first place, according to the ideology of the capitalist death cult. They printed this money for it to be used. They just refuse to accept that it's not being used, right? That's really what it is. They're just refusing to accept that it isn't being used. Yeah, I just started up. This is my third one, Juliet. I'm just starting to do live streams. I'm just starting to. I just moved into this new beautiful space. A big reason why I wasn't doing live streaming in the first place is because I just didn't have the space for it. I was like in this really cramped little apartment, and I would have had to like really change how everything looked. Now I can have this desk in a nice corner of my apartment and in this beautiful space that I'm so lucky to have. Just discovered your channel last week. Well, great. Tell all your friends. Tell all your neighbors. Tell everybody. Tell the world. Like, share, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. My Patreon's in the description. Yeah, all that kind of stuff. I'm so glad you're here, Juliet. I heard all of these stories about the Liberal government talking about changing the social program because EI won't be valid after the pandemic. I personally think it's an election ploy. It's always an election ploy with the Liberals. You never know what they're going to actually move on, right? Like, they did move on legalizing marijuana. They didn't pardon anybody, right? They didn't go all the way with it. But then they don't move on, like, election reform, right? Or if they do move on it, they immediately get derailed instantly, right? And so, like, you can't trust these Liberals, right? They'll just say whatever. They'll just say whatever. You know, like, if we stood up in front of them and said, like, and everybody was saying, like, we should make it so that hair dye is free so that I can dye my hair between pink and purple when I choose. The Liberals would be like, we should have free hair dye, right? It wouldn't matter. Like, they'll just say whatever. They don't have a moral compass, right? They're just going to repeat back to you what you say to them and then do whatever makes them the most amount of money. Which is a big reason why I think the marijuana legalization gets done, is because the Liberals understood that, oh, hey, we can make a lot of money with this. Audit finds Ontario failed to track 4.4 billion in... So not only are these conservatives here in Ontario unable, like, they don't want to spend money, right? So they're literally just gonna, like, hold back on spending. Now when they do spend money, where did the money go? I don't know. Didn't we write it down? Didn't we write down where the money went, guys? Guys, where did we give that? Did we give that $4.4 billion to all our buddies? I don't know. Jim was supposed to write it down. Like, and obviously that's what's happened with this $4.4 billion, right? These guys are crooks. They're such scam artists. They're such grifters. They don't give a shit about anybody but themselves. And if you're telling me that there's $4.4 billion in pandemic relief spending that's gone missing, that's been unaccounted for, where do you think it went? Where do you think it went? Jeez Louise, man. How is this not a crime? Like, how can the Trudeau government not just be like, excuse me? You can't just pocket $4.4 billion. Where'd it go? Right? Like, $4.4 billion, this is not an insignificant amount of money. Like, that's not just an accounting error, right? Like, that's a significant amount of money that the Ford administration has obviously stolen. Like, where'd it go? But the federal Liberals won't do something like that because they're just as guilty of doing this kind of stuff, right? And you know, if they tap someone, they'll get tapped back. News outlets finding reasons for the masses to spend less time at home for their jobs. Boston Globe Ideas, reason number 3, working from home can be too convenient. Commuting gives us time to process our days, lets our mind wander and explore ideas. Additionally, office life forces transitions and breaks throughout the day. These guys are fascists, eh? Go fuck yourself, Boston Globe Ideas. Nobody wants to commute. Nobody's looking forward to their commute at work. And if you wanted time to process your day, let your mind wander and explore ideas, you mean meditate? You mean, see this? You see that poster I've got in the back there? Do you think I put that up there just because I like to look at it? Right? No. It's so that you can sit and decompress and let your mind wander, let your brain process, all that kind of stuff. I don't need to be on transit to do that, Boston Globe Ideas. Get the fuck out of here. Oh my God. Yeah, Ontario Nurses Association appalled as Ford government continues to fight pay equity maintenance to Supreme Court of Canada. Yeah, they want wages to be zero. That's all. They don't care how they have to do it. There's a lot to unpack here. I'm not going to bother. There's a couple of that, like, I am on, like, our Ontario, our Toronto, like, a boring dystopia, which is fairly straightforward, like, memification of the news, in many ways. But places like Send in the Tanks, I, like, pay attention, but I think there's a lot of kind of conspiracy stuff that happens there as well. So, too much to sift through on this channel, so I'll just skip through. If I'm skipping stuff, it's usually just because it's like I don't want to sift through it. Like it's there. You got to kind of like do more research than I want to do right now. Is it possible that maybe Stephen Guilbeault hasn't actually read Bill C-10? Yeah. No, none of these guys have actually read this. If you actually read Bill C-10, you're just like, oh, this is existing legislation that has applied to television broadcasting for decades, that they're now taking and putting, and they're applying to social media sites like YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Netflix, HBO, right? And like the reason why there's a big pushback is because these tech people don't want to be they don't want to be okay Bob, I am happy putting you in timeout and removing that comment. Don't need any of that. Don't need any of that around here, Bob. And because, like, of course, like Netflix and HBO and all these big tech guys, like, none of them want their stuff to be regulated, right? None of them want any government involvement. None of them want any of that kind of stuff. And so they're putting pressure on it, right? They're trying to pretend like Bill C-10, Orwell. No, it's not. Like, no, it isn't. It just isn't. And the people who are claiming that it's like this big Orwellian thing that's going to take our rights away and all this kind of stuff, they haven't even read the bill. It's not. We have something called the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms protects us. Like, Stephen Guilbeault hasn't read the bill. Probably doesn't know anything about the bill. He's just getting talking points from YouTube, right? He's just getting tech industry. Like, Mark Zuckerberg is giving him a little pamphlet, and he's going, oh, well, this says this. That's it. Canada should see 50% cut in fuel capacity if Line 5 pipeline shuts down. Okay, why is Line 5 pipeline shutting down? Like, this ties in to, like, the gas shortage stuff that we're seeing. We don't, like, the gas shortage stuff that we're seeing is, we're going to see that eventually, guys. Like, the oil runs out, right? Like, gas runs out. We actually have already hit peak oil. We have found all of the oil on the planet, we think, right? We're like literally going into the Arctic and crossing our fingers. Maybe there's some in the Arctic. Like, we're literally, people are actually starting to fund like deep sea diving organizations for us to actually try to, maybe there's some oil at the bottom of the ocean so we can pollute the entire ocean, trying to get at it, right? So we have found the world's fuel reserves, right? Like, we don't, and we've already hit the peak of it, and we're actually going to decline. Yeah, I'm seeing that right here. Michigan government, who set Wednesday last, yeah. If the line does get shut down either before, well, here, let's try and find a map. Where's Line 5? Line 5 gas line map. Oh, maybe Enbridge. Will Enbridge itself provide this? That'd be nice. Look at that. Look at that, Enbridge. You're good for something. A legend of some kind would be nice. Runs under the Great, and Ship Anchor have hit it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's going to start with oil, and because our entire agricultural infrastructure is dependent on oil, that's going to impact. So it'll be like a domino effect, right? And we've got to move a lot faster than we're moving. And generally, it's just stupid. It's just stupidity on stupidity on stupidity, right? If the line does get shut down, petroleum, significant violent reaction, yeah, it probably would. Like, and stories like this I look at and I go like, yeah, like, this is bad, but like, it's something we're going to have to face sooner rather than later, right? We have to I am yet to actually see an article written by any news organization anywhere that accepts the basic premise that the oil runs out. We should do something about that. Like, let's start talking honestly about that and what that means, right? Now, of course, there is also the counter argument to that, which is like, Well, we are a bunch of scared, dumb monkeys. Remember when the pandemic started and there was like a run on toilet paper? People went out and like ran and got some toilet paper? Anyway. So, which one of these is line 5? They're not being exact. That's line 7. Line 6. 6. This map sucks, Embridge. Like, thanks for providing the map, but I could use, like... I could use, oh, well. So it's one of these. And it's, yeah, if they shut down any of these, of course it's going to nail our productivity. Of course it's going to be that kind of stuff, right? And, like, there's a big reason why, like, any protest movement, if any protest movement wanted to get serious about really having people pay attention to them, it would be to disrupt gas and oil flow, right? That would be what you would need to do. Like, getting in the way of railways is easier, right? Unless, like, shutting down a pipeline probably means blowing the pipeline up, right? And that's dangerous. Like, that's super dangerous. Shutting down a railway, get 100 people, stand on the railway. Oh yeah, Nestle. We should banish them. We should banish Nestle. What are they even doing here? Literally, when the president of Nestle stood up, or the CEO of Nestle stood up and said, water is not a human right, we should have banished him on that day. It should have just gone through, like, no, we're not going to deal with psychopaths who are trying to steal our water. Like, obviously get rid of these guys. And the idea that we're even considering doing business with these guys, like the idea that we're not banishing people who are saying stuff like that in public on camera, like, if you've ever seen you've seen a narcissistic sociopath, it's the CEO of Nestle, right? Like, we should absolutely stop doing business with them. We should absolutely stop. We should actually do an embargo or do a, what's that called? It's not an embargo. It's boycott. I got there. I did it. Boycott. 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 Don't buy Nestle stuff. Just don't. Like, and like, but we as a country should create a law that says if Nestle, and have a list of people's names, if these people are involved in the process, they can't sell it here, right? Get rid of these guys. They're psychopaths. And openly, too. Canadians are so anxious about the blistering house market, they're open to rate hikes to cool it. That's not going to solve a goddamn thing. The problem with the housing market is that billionaires have turned it into a speculative market. That's what's happening. That billionaires are treating our housing market like a speculative casino. That they'll buy property, sit on it in empty houses. They won't do anything with it. They won't even rent it because it's too much of a bother to actually rent it. And they'll just get rid of it, right? And or they'll just and then when they get rid of it, it'll be at this inflated, ridiculous place. But we are also now, remember, we're collapsing into neo-feudalism, right? That's the trajectory we're on. We're collapsing into neo-feudalism. And if your entire economic system, which right now in North America is basically just financialization, like the stock market, right? Like, we don't produce anything. We don't have a real economy. The only thing we actually manufacture are weapons. So we're not actually making anything, right? And if that's the situation where and all of that's going to collapse, like, it has to collapse, right? Like, it's not real. It's not based on anything. It's complete nonsense. It's just numbers going in a circle. It's completely fabricated. And once that all collapses, well, then what do you want to have? Like, what do you want to have access to? Well, land. You want to have access to land, right? You want to have access to good land. And so these billionaires are just buying up condos and buying up apartments and buying up land so that when the whole thing goes tits up, at least they've got this thing, right? At least they've got a parcel that they can do something with, right? Instead of just, like this, oh, I've got stocks in A Corp. Like, who cares, right? Like, that's going to be meaningless. Business owners at breaking point, ready to defy lockdown. I mean, Yeah. Yeah. Hey, Barnabas. How you doing, bud? I'm glad you made it live. Look at you. My heart actually does go out to these business owners. I really do think if anybody has been jerked around in the middle of this pandemic, it's your small business owner. Like, just the person who owns a storefront on like one of the drags here, like down in the beaches, like a small independent coffee joint, right? Somebody who's got like a knickknack shop or something like this. These guys have been jerked around like unbelievably. Like, we should have been upfront with these guys right away. We should have said we're gonna lock down this place seriously for 2 months, right? And honestly, I think it would have been easier on them. It would have been easier on them to do a proper lockdown and just shut the whole thing down. It would have been easier on everybody. But what we're doing here, it's like, instead of pulling the tooth out, instead of like getting in there and just pulling the tooth out, it's like we're going to slowly and even then we're probably not going to get the tooth out. And so in the end, we're going to have to do it the way we should have done it in the first place. So it's just like we're torturing these people. We're just torturing them for no reason, right? And it's all being done for optics. Like, it's not actually achieving anything, right? Like people like Doug Ford, people like his ilk, they don't genuinely care about these business owners. They care about Walmart. Gonna have a little puppy moment. Gonna have a little puppy moment. Gonna have a little puppy moment. Puppy moment, puppy moment. Puppy, 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 puppy moment. A family level business is fine by me. Yeah, like, it's so annoying when I start talking to people and I'm talking about like Walmart. I'm talking about like Amazon. I'm talking about like Facebook. And they're like, but my grandfather owns a penny shop where he sells buttons. I'm like, no one cares. Like, no one cares. Fine. Like, who cares about that at all? Like, we're talking about hereditary monarchical level wealth. Like, nobody gives a shit if you want to like trade pennies with one another. It's time to build a small home or a tiny house community in all the smaller communities around the big cities in Canada. Not everyone will sleep on the street and vote for a party that won't fix things. Yeah, the tiny house movement that happened here, I actually know somebody who's loosely connected to all that. Like, a guy was just going around, just like a carpenter was going around, building these tiny homes, and then the city made him stop. And they made him stop for the dumbest reasons. They were like, these are a fire hazard. I'm like, no, they're not. Like, nobody's lighting a live fire in any of these places. Oh, I know. What's that, buddy? What's that? Oh, I got a little bit more peanut butter for you, buddy. Here you go. Ugh. I'm at Queen and Carlaw, but looking to move. Queen and Carlaw is a good neighborhood. It's a good neighborhood. How long you been there, bud? Like, you might be hard pressed to find cheaper rent unless you move out of the city. Rent in the last 3-4 years has just gone because the billionaires are buying everything, right? So then they're jacking the rent. You either bourgeoisie class or a worker, and they don't want to be exploited by another. It's the only thing they can lose. Yeah, it's true. Small business owners do have something to lose, and it's going to be heartbreaking because they are going to lose it, right? When you play a game of Monopoly, right, there is no such thing as a small business. Like, maybe you start as a small, like, you have like your one house, right? But eventually those houses become more houses, then eventually become a hotel, and then eventually you've got the whole thing, right? Like, and that's how it works. Like, everybody gets bought out eventually or chased out of the market eventually. That's the structure of capitalism. That's how it works. I don't think Ford has a chance with all of the people he's screwed with. Yeah, his polling numbers are showing that's the truth. That he's truth. That he's dipped well below getting another majority at least. And I think once we get into an actual election where he has to stand on a stage and actually like justify some of the stuff that he's been doing, he's not going to look good. Yeah, basement, Jeff. Yeah, basement. Basement apartments are tough. Like, it's tough to live in a basement apartment. And that's pretty expensive rent for a basement apartment. The location's good. Like, that's really what you're paying for there is the basement. Is the location. Like, Queen and Carlisle's a pretty decent location, but yeah, I'd be trying to do what you're doing, Jeff, if I was in the basement, trying to find a new spot, for sure. Ruth says, I was going to build one and had it set, but the county was taking too long and I needed a place to live. Oh, you're going to do one of these tiny homes? Oh, yeah. I think the tiny home thing is a great idea. I think there's a type of person who they just really want a small place to call their own, right? Just a small space to do something in, right? Like, I feel like the place I'm currently in is like, even... I shouldn't say this out loud because I don't want to give the place away, but it's a touch too big for just one person. But like, this place was built in like the 50s, right? This building was built in like the 40s and 50s, right? And the entire idea of this place was that it was for a single person, right? The entire purpose of all of these units was that they were for individual people. And we have all of the space in the world to be able to do that. We have all of the space in the world to have everybody have their own space and have it be cheap and have it be affordable. It's just these goddamn capitalists. And the system is ridiculous. Yeah, 800 square feet. 800 square feet's pretty good, actually. Like, that's a pretty good... Is $40,000 the cost? Is that the price?
Mr. Say, I couldn't let you leave without asking you again about the situation that's happening in Jerusalem and Gaza. We heard from the Prime Minister yesterday. He kind of basically had comments that were very similar to yours. I'm sure you heard those. What more does Canada need to do to achieve peace in this region?
What's going on is very serious. And my heart goes out to the folks and the community members, Palestinians that are struggling with horrible loss and extreme violence right now. It is very scary. And we've seen some of the reports, the images. It is shocking and it is horrible. And so what we're calling on, and what I'll be calling on later on today as well, is that Canada can play a stronger role. And Justin Trudeau specifically can play a stronger role. One of the things that we've mentioned and other human rights experts have said, we need to put pressure on Israel to engage in a peaceful resolution. And so one of those elements of pressure that we can place is making sure we're not selling arms to Israel that are being used in a conflict which is breaching international law or violating human rights. So that's a concrete step we can take, something that I support and something that international human rights groups have said. We need to apply pressure so that we can encourage a peaceful resolution. We need peace. People in Israel and in Palestine have the right to live in peace, but we need to apply pressure to achieve that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like, stop selling weapons, stop participating, right? Like, you want to do something about it? Yeah. But cutting gun sales would hurt profit, thus taxes. Oh, wait, they don't pay taxes anyway. Hear how Uber hid $6 billion in profits. I'm not surprised to hear that, Barnabas. I hadn't heard that, but I'm not surprised to hear that. No, the whole Uber Lyft thing is such a scandal. Like the fact that they're trying to reclassify the workers for Uber as employees and it's like destroying their entire business model. I'm like, well, then their business model should be destroyed, shouldn't it? And maybe if they didn't hoard $6 billion away and actually use that $6 billion to, I don't know, pay their employees, who they should classify as employees, there wouldn't be a problem. Imagine if everyone could get a small home for under $100,000. Our parents and grandparents did it. Yeah, and there's no reason. Like, there's no reason why it can't be that way again, Ruth, except that, the billionaires are just hoarding this property, right? They're not interested in selling. They're interested in having it so that when the Great Reset occurs, they have land, right? That's what it's all about. The government says it's working on a plan to begin inoculating those between ages of 12 and 17 starting in June. I mean, inoculating them more than they already do. Ha! That's kind of an education joke right there, yeah. Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba. We want to limit mobility. Doug Ford defends outdoor amenity closures despite science table advice. Yeah, once again, the Ford administration ignoring science, ignoring the experts. Wasn't a priority for them. People love saying you're going to need the police when you get robbed. And, like, I don't know a single person who had a police officer stop them from getting robbed. I know a lot of people who got robbed and told the police, who then took notes and drove away and did nothing. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, the police aren't gods. Like, they can't just, like, materialize a person, right? Like, that's... I remember I had a place that got broken into and some of my stuff got stolen. And I called the police, and they sent over somebody, and they took and the guy was very upfront with me, and I appreciated how upfront he was being with me. He was just like, yeah, dude, you're not going to get your stuff back, right? Like, the reason why I'm taking your information is so that we can put together a pattern, right? Because small-scale crimes like this, like a B&E where there's, like, a computer stolen or something, like some electronics stolen, well, maybe that ties into some sort of a larger sort of thing. But your stuff's gone. And it's like, well, yeah. At least he was being honest with me. I appreciated that. Ontarians a bit shocked. Ford waited 14 months to pull out the Blame Immigrants playbook. The Beaverton, man. The Beaverton. These guys are on point. Whoever's writing for these guys, Luke Gordon Field, congratulations, Luke. You're doing it. You're doing it. In the wake of numerous attack ads and tweets from Ford and his team that falsely claimed the third wave in Ontario was caused by the federal government's failure to close the border, Ontarians have expressed some surprise that Ford waited 14 months before pulling out the not-so-subtle dog whistle blaming immigrants for his government's failings. Oh, yeah, it's just good. It's just good. Good, clean Canadian fun right there. Good, clean Canadian fun. Trust in Canadian political leaders has cratered during the pandemic, except in Quebec. Yeah, of course it's cratered, right? Like, these guys are all frauds, right? Is there a single one of these guys that you can point to and be like, he's doing right by his citizens? I don't think there's a single one. Like, Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, right at the beginning, when they passed the CERB, right? When they passed the CERB, that was them grabbing hold of a good idea and executing it, and then they got admonished for it by the capitalists. Their conservative allies admonished them openly about it, and now they've done everything they can to dismantle that, so that we'll just forget that they could have always subsidized our wages, right? The government can subsidize our wages at any time, right? They can literally pay us to stay home at any time, and that's completely fine. It's completely fine. But they're not going to do that because they need to sell us back to capitalists. Because we're a commodity, right? I'm not an individual person with my own thoughts or hopes or dreams. I'm not a spiritual creature. I'm not a quantum being that's been randomly generated in the world. I'm just a commodity to be sold to capitalists. And that's the point. Jeff Bezos just bought a $500 million yacht. Yeah, like... One of the major things I keep saying on this channel, Barnabas, is like, it's going to get more obvious that this system has failed, right? And stuff like that. It's like obvious. Like Jeff Bezos buying a $500 million yacht. That's gross. Like, that's grotesque. Like, maybe if he bought the $500 million yacht to be like a, I don't know, to be like a cargo, right? Like if it was a cargo ship, you're like, oh yeah, okay. At least that's got a use, theoretically. But like, he's just using that, yeah, the timing. Well, and he's just recently gone through a divorce, right? And he and Bill Gates both divorced in the same month to make it look really suspicious, right? Extra suspicious that like, and like Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates, they're not divorcing their wives because they're like, you know, oh, we're going through marital difficulties and we're going to divorce all that kind of stuff. They're still going to hang out with their wives, right? They're divorcing their wives so that they can keep more money, just because of the way that the tax laws are written. You go through a divorce and they got $40 billion that's can be completely untaxed, and yeah, it's a total loophole scam. That's actually talked about in The Shawshank Redemption, if you'll remember correctly, right? That remember that scene where Andy talks to the guard, and the guard's going to throw him off the roof, and then he talks the guard out of throwing him off the roof, and in exchange he'll do some accounting for him. Well, what was the scam? Well, not a scam, but what was the thing? If you give your wife a certain amount of money, it's protected from taxes. They can't take it. And it's the same thing with divorce. Oh, that money's not my money, right? It's my wife's money now, and it's free. She's not able to. And it's like a law that was written back in the, the 1910s when, a woman that gets divorced, like women are despondent and helpless creatures, so we can't tax them. Anyway. Low-income Ontario families were hit hard by COVID. Yeah. A McMaster study suggests government financial assistance was not enough. Yeah. Yeah. We needed to pass a basic income. Like, if we wanted to avoid the heartbreak, right, we needed to have passed a basic income. I'll be open about my situation. I feel like I, threaded the needle of financial support, where, I just managed to be in the right category the whole time, right? Just and then I made it. But, I'm not gonna... but as I was doing it, I was very aware that there's people who are just going to get left behind in this. Somebody's just not going to make... They're just going to be in the wrong side of the coin, because the system wasn't universalized. It wasn't created to be universalized. And low-income Ontario families were already in the precariat, right? They were already floating around on the bottom of things, saying that we're one missed paycheck away from insolvency, right? That was already happening. And so, yeah, of course a crisis like this hits. And now we're experiencing a labor shortage where people won't work. But, and the narrative is that, people are just staying at home on unemployment because they don't want to, all this kind of stuff. No, the actual story is that you bankrupted everybody, right? We went through a major... People were already precarious. People were already on the edge and about to tip over. And then a crisis hit. You laid everybody off. Or you fired everybody. They lost their health insurance. They lost everything. So they didn't get the paycheck, right? They went tits up, right? Probably got evicted, right? They left. That's the reason you have a labor shortage. These people just left because they had nothing in the... nobody was hiring. Nothing was going on, right? They left. They probably went somewhere where the rent could be super cheap. They're probably living in a motorhome somewhere, right? They're not going to go work at Wendy's. They're not going to just pick up a job at Burger King now because you put a sign out that said now hiring, right? Why? Because they live outside the city now because you kicked them out. That's the reason you have a labor shortage. It's not people sitting at home, unemployment, all this kind of stuff. It's because you chased all your workers away because you wouldn't pay them. What do you think? Well, they're not thinking. That's why. The mine Canada wouldn't sell to the Chinese. Agnico Eagle embraces reduced operations for its new Western Nunavut mine. Oh, okay. I'm always skeptical of stuff that comes out of our Canada because some of its moderators are actually fascists. And I don't mean I think that they have fascists. I mean they are literally fascists. We have the proof. And and so the stuff that comes out of our Canada is usually pretty hard right, which is why On Guard for Thee and Canada Left exist at all, because people cottoned on to the fact that, if you actually start talking like a lefty in our Canada, you're going to meet some neo-Nazis. And those neo-Nazis are well protected by the fascist moderators that exist. So when I see this kind of thing, and it's got 462 upvotes, I'm expecting there to be a pretty major dog whistle involved in this. Plans to stick to a schedule, reduced operations. So they just recently get a mine, recently acquired, so it says. I don't know anything about this, so. And it's going to reduce its operations. Why is it reducing operations? They want to complete an overview. Okay. Full economic, analysis take a year. The mill has been problematic, running decently. Okay. I just don't... what's the story? Looks like First Nations people got a hold of a mine, and they are just kind of seeing what the story is with the mine. Our message is clear. We will hire every butchering that word, my apologies. Ninevehite Muit, my bad, who's been working at Hope Bay when we're allowed to do so. The timing of that depended on the approval. Yeah, okay. I don't really get what the story is. There's a mine. Things are happening at a mine where things happen. I love this. Listen, no one is vilifying rich people. They are villains. If you run a billion-dollar company, give yourself millions in dollars in benefits, but pay your individual workers less than a living wage and give them shitty insurance, what are you if not a villain? Yep. Black to the future. Adjective J. Shout out. You did it. This is like a seminal statement. This is something that, like, 100 years from now, people will be like, oh, look at what they were saying, right? Like, this is a upvote. Upvote. These people are going home to find a survival job because they're waiting on CRB. Well, but like down in the States, Ruth, like they didn't get anything like the CRB. They didn't get any of that, right? Like they're not getting any kind of support whatsoever. They're just completely boned. So it's like the completely destructive. It's a completely destructive situation. ICU nurses say doctors are getting 10 times their pay for similar work during pandemic. Yeah, yeah. Like, again, the capitalists want it to be zero. Doug Ford wants it to be zero. He doesn't want to pay you anything, right? Ontario's vaccination progress, numbers up. Look, all these numbers, they're up. That one's down. But numbers up, good. Good numbers. Look, line go up. If you're on unemployment, stay on unemployment. This is becoming a real political issue, and there's more upward pressure on wages than there has been in decades. Well, and yeah, now's the time to unionize. Now's the time for us to do exactly what we're doing here, which is actually discuss what has happened to us and to attempt to organize in a revolutionary project. Remember, everybody, I'm a communist, right? Like, the purpose of this is to create and foment a revolution. How many of you are on here? 8. Hey, guys, 8 of you. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I don't really know who Vosh is, but he seems to have become like an important... I've never actually even done a search for this guy, but he's become like this interesting figure that I run into in memes often enough. Still no vaccines in Eastern Ontario, eh? I generally stay out of the vaccination conversation just because I'm pretty low on the list. Like, I'm a fairly healthy, kind of middle-ish age sort of person. Like, I'm not... I'd rather see, like, high-risk people get access to the vaccine before I do. So I don't really know anything about it. All I know is the line is going up. That's it. Line goes up. When companies don't pay their workers a living wage, taxpayers pick up the tab. Every year, Americans spend that much money. That's like that's billion, 153 billion to subsidize McDonald's and Walmart's underpaid workers. The real freeloaders in this country are corporations, not people. Yeah. Yeah. Like, your government should work for people, individual people, right? And it shouldn't work for corporations. The New York Times Jerusalem correspondent lives in the occupied home of a BBC Arabic journalist who was expelled by Zionist militias in 1948. The barbarism of Western media has no bottom. Well, that's true generally. If you're a billionaire in America today, you probably got a lot richer since the start of the pandemic. Meanwhile, if you're a fast food worker getting paid the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour, you've not seen a pay increase in more than a decade. How absurd is that? Yeah. Yeah. Bernie Sanders, I'm really glad that he's in the national conversation. I'm really glad that people are paying attention to him on the national stage. I mean, he's not perfect, obviously, but I'm just happy he's here, honestly. We already saw this one. That's just another Jimmy thing. Cartoons are fun. PSW temporary worker risks her life to help other, but barely earns enough to get by. I bet you this is exactly what I'm talking about, right? Like this is as a personal support worker, Samaria risks her own health to care for others. As a temporary agency worker, she faces low wages, job insecurity, no benefits or sick pay. How much she's earning is just enough to cover rent and a few other essentials. I don't know next week if I have a job or not. It's just really frustrating. Yeah. Who asked not to be identified over her concerns about facing repercussions. Yeah. We live in a free and open society, right? You're allowed to, we're free, right? What a joke. 5 years later, she's still an assignment employee without access to basic benefits or having ever seen a raise, right? Yeah, it's just absolutely gross. Like they'll keep you as a whatever title they need to give you, intern, temporary worker, right? Any of that kind of stuff. Part-time. They'll create any category that they need to create in order to pay you zero, which is the goal, right? It's always to pay you zero. Oh yeah, Ruth. If you're living with like high risk people, you got to do what you got to do, right? You got to do what you got to do. If in America, if you make enough money, you can continue to have teeth. Opposition leader calls for coroner's inquest into long-term care deaths. Yeah, we should be pushing on that button for decades, right? Like these conservatives, like, and this goes all the way back to Mike Harris, right? Like Mike Harris is the board of directors on some of these places. Mike Harris, if you're not familiar, was a former conservative premier, which is like a governor for my American friends here in Ontario. And he's sitting on the board of directors of a lot of these long-term care homes that he helped privatize. So like he gets elected into power, he privatizes public utilities, long-term care homes, he privatizes them, and then he sits on the board of directors. Like, do you not see the conflict of interest? How is this not a conflict of interest? The guy literally privatized something so that he personally could make money off of it. And then now the military is going in and saying these places are shitholes. And more people are dying there. And like, and not just dying of COVID. Like, they're documenting cases of people who die because they're not given water. That they're just abandoned in these rooms and they just wait for them to die of dehydration. Like, ugh. I've been working contracts for 10 years in social services. No benefits, no job security, less pay. Yep. You're just a contract worker, right? It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how long you're there, right? They can categorize you as what they need to categorize you. And if they can pay you zero, they will. That's okay, buddy. That's okay. Good boy. PSWs were going senior home to senior home. That's how it spread so quickly. Yeah, and then back to like shelters. Like there's great documentation and great journalism that's been done on the fact that like some of these PSWs are living in shelters. So they're going from like senior home to senior home and then into a shelter and then back to senior home to senior home. What do you think's going on? Mike Harris, destructor of decent livable income for the poor and disabled. Yeah, that's conservatism for you, right? Like, at this stage in the game, I say it really cleanly. If you're voting conservative, I think you might have a mental illness. Like, I think you might have something very serious wrong with you. Especially the type of conservatives that clutch onto a book that tells them not to do the exact opposite, right? Yeah, shelter staff are also going to different shelters. Yeah. And like, even if you think about it, it just as cleanly as like I used to work at a toy store, right? Well, people go from their house to the transit, right? Which is a enclosed space where there's a bunch of strangers who are doing the same thing you're doing. And then you go work in a box store, right? An enclosed area where all these people congregate. Then they get back on the TTC, this enclosed space, and then they go home. And then mingle with the people who lived in their home that did exactly the same thing. And we're supposed to say like, oh, but we're in a bubble. What the fuck is wrong with us? Like, there's something wrong with us. They're good at making you worry about you, and you legit can't care for others. Yep. Just it's all about wasting our time, right? It's all about keeping us busy so that we can't do this exact thing right here. So that we can't all sit down in solidarity with one another, discuss even the most basic daily news, and then agree how we think things should move forward, right? That we always need to subserviate ourselves to the whims of capital, and the only people who are allowed to have meaningful discussions are the capitalists and the politicians they bribe. And that's it. They don't want you to be involved in politics. They don't want you to go out. They want you to feel as though you're connected because you go out and vote for one of their people. That's what they want, right? They're not interested in you actually organizing on a revolutionary line and actually taking to the streets. They don't want to see that, right? And the way that they're going to deal with that, to keep you out of the streets, to keep you out of protesting, to keep you out of focusing on revolutionary projects, is just keep you busy. That's it. Just waste your time on nonsense. There's a poutine truck for the vaccine lineup at Jimmy Simpson. Yeah, that's a great idea. You got a vaccine lineup? But just drive a poutine truck in there, dude. Come on, there's an entrepreneur right there. There's somebody who's pulling themselves up by the bootstraps and trying to go where the money is, right? All I hear when people repeat this, I'm fiscally conservative but socially liberal. I love weed, but fuck poor people. Yeah. Like, fiscally conservative is now, like, I close the door on that now. Like, you might as well say financially illiterate, right? Well, not financially illiterate, but, like, if you're saying you're fiscally conservative, you do not understand how government works. If you are saying fiscally conservative, and if you're voting along fiscal conservative lines, like, if you think that the government should be run as a business, you're dumb. Like, you're dumb. The government can create and destroy money, right? It's not a business. It shouldn't be run like a business, right? Running something that should not be run for profit as a for-profit industry is a disaster. It always has been, and it will continue to be one. So if you're saying you're fiscally conservative, you are genuinely saying out loud, I am illiterate on how government works. Please vote for me. If Doug Ford wants to make the May long weekend safer, he should open up outdoor activities. It's such small scale nonsense, eh? Like, it's such, like, small scale, like, open up outdoor, like, for God's sakes, like, we need to do, like, a full scale lockdown. Like, we need to do a real lockdown. I don't know. Bill C-11 needs an overhaul. I don't know what Bill C-11 is. Anybody know Bill C-11? To modernize privacy laws for Canada's private sector would give consumers less control of their personal data and organizations more power to use it to make money. Would be a step back. See, when somebody like the privacy commissioner actually is ringing a bell about a bill, like, that has not happened with Bill C-10. There's nobody actually inside of government in a meaningful way ringing this bell about C-10. But when somebody who's like the privacy commissioner is actually saying, like, Bill C-11, okay, that's interesting. Frequently misaligned, less protective of consumers' data than privacy laws in other countries. I think when it comes to privacy laws, especially when it comes to, like, the internet and digital sort of stuff, my hope is that this kind of stuff doesn't get funneled into the whole, like, and then Orwell, and then everybody's got, oh my, you're infected, and all this. Cause I think a lot of it is, like, we don't know how any of this really works. We don't really understand how the internet is impacting our society. We don't really know how to make legislation about it. The people who have been writing the legislation for these things in the first place are the guys who are, like, saying, like, the internet is a series of tubes, right? Like, they're making legislation thinking that the internet is like a telephone. You pick up the telephone and you talk to somebody on the other side of the telephone, except somebody else can get in, and then you're talking to a bunch of people on the telephone, right? Like, and that's how they think of the internet. And so, like, I hope that, I mean, this won't happen, obviously, because of who we are as a people. My hope, though, is that we'll look at something like this and be like, oh, okay, so like this is where we have found ourselves because we didn't quite understand what the internet was, the repercussions in the society, how it would actually be used, like what privacy, like what is the privacy issue between me and, let's say, Facebook, right? And I mean, it makes sense. And I mean, the conversation is made extra difficult because organizations like Facebook are demonic on their face, right? Like they want all of your data. They want to make as much money as they can from it, and they want you to get nothing. That's obviously what they want. And it makes sense, though, that like our government would be behind the 8 ball on it because it's like a new technology that's just blistering us in the face. So my hope is that we'll have a rational, reasonable conversation about it as we learn more about this kind of stuff. Bill C-11 could let organizations seek consent for vague and mysterious purposes, such as improving your consumer experience. Oh yeah, okay. Yeah. I feel like here's a guy who probably knows more about the subject than the rest of us, and so probably we should listen. Yeah, probably we should listen. Anyway, which means we'll ignore him promptly. Elon Musk, Tesla will no longer accept Bitcoin as payments. It's outrageous that Tesla was accepting Bitcoin in the first place. It's outrageous that Elon Musk, who we all are supposed to worship and think he's the greatest guy ever, and who was on Saturday Night Live recently and like all this kind of stuff, Elon Musk is just the son of an apartheid emerald miner who owned emerald mines during South African apartheid. Yeah, of course he's a billionaire, right? Of course he's embedded in the financial sector, right? It's the only thing that makes Elon Musk interesting to me is his constant attention seeking. The fact that he needs to put himself as the center of attention. It just kind of tells me he was ignored by his parents, right? Like he's just constantly attention seeking. He can't just be like the quiet guy in the background. He can't just be the financier. He has to like take over a company and then buy the right to be called the inventor, right? He has this like really arrogant worldview where he sees himself as like this really high level kind of important figure when he's not at all, like at all. Anyway, to the point on hand, like, did you guys know that Bitcoin is, to power Bitcoin, like to have Bitcoin exist in the world, it requires the same amount of energy as it does to power the country of Argentina? Yeah. You want the people of Argentina to have power, right? That's obvious. So you're going to spend the same amount of power, that's fossil fuels, that's all of this stuff, in order to have Bitcoin exist. Why? Like, who gives a shit about Bitcoin, right? The only people who care about Bitcoin are rich assholes who are trying to hide their money. Right? That's it. Or they're trying to trade with one another and avoid detection from the FBI or the CIA, right? Like, well, we see here that Bitcoin showed that you traded $1 million to Bob. Can we ask what that was for? No. It doesn't. You could be buying child slaves, right? Like, that's, who knows, right? Well, you think Jeffrey Epstein wasn't trading in Bitcoin? Like, Bitcoin, as far as I'm concerned, it needs to go away. It shouldn't exist. It's a drain on our society, and it just lets these narcissistic sociopaths do things they shouldn't be doing in the first place. Ugh. The Ontario Medical Association now supports reopening outdoor activities. Oh, okay. I got to tell you, if the Ontario Medical Association is supporting it, then I do too. The Ontario Medical Association is a really great organization. They've said they are an organization that have supported a basic income. They have said that the number one issue facing us, the number one health issue in Ontario before the pandemic, obviously, but the number one health issue was poverty. That the health industry was facing issues surrounding poverty more than anything out, and so as far as I'm concerned, these guys are doing their legwork. They're being honest. They're being open. And if they're saying we can reopen outdoor activities, then okay, I'm down. I always listen to experts. We always should. The experts they're called experts for a reason. Getting a lot of Heroes of the Storm stuff. Okay. Chrystia Freeland defends wage subsidy as opposition accused liberals of showering their rich Bay Street friends. I mean, that's exactly what they did, right? They created a wage subsidy program. I need to see. This is probably going to be paywalled. Yeah, paywalled. Maybe it's in the comments. Literally, that's exactly what they've done, though. They've just given huge handouts to their buddies and to their corporate friends. And doesn't look like there's a non-paywall version. Oh, there it is. There it is. No, never mind. Anyway. It's, no, the purpose of the program. The purpose of the wage program. Thanks, DM. Thanks, bud. I appreciate it. Thanks for dropping in and just saying hi. Like the video on the way out. Hey, everybody, if you could like the video right now, that'd be great. Yeah, Chrystia Freeland defending this is completely abhorrent, if you ask me, right? Like, if she was taking the position, oh, well, this wage subsidy program is actually being misused and we're looking into it, that would be a better strategy, honestly. But this idea that we can defend, like, the government created a wage subsidy program that billionaires are using as a slush fund. That's what's happening. They're taking hundreds of millions of dollars for themselves, giving themselves big bonuses, jamming money into offshore accounts, and the government's just handing it out to them, right? In the middle of this pandemic. It's grotesque. Like, it's grotesque. It's ridiculous. And then simultaneously we're told, they turn around and will say, oh, well, we don't see a path for the basic income. Literally shoveling money into their rich friends' faces while saying to the poor, go get fucked. That's the Liberal Party in a nutshell. Oh, I don't know anything about this. Yang receives massive backlash for defending Israel's attack on Al-Aqsa Mosque. I bet you anything Yang just doesn't know anything about it. I bet you anything, right? And he is probably receiving backlash, but Yang is like one of these guys who does get a lot of pushback from American media. I think the American media is really upset that Andrew Yang exists because he wasn't created by the media. He was created in spite of the media. He pushed against the media, and now here he is. And he may be elected the mayor of New York. And so I think that he's receiving a lot of pushback for really banal stuff. And I suspect that's what this is. I don't want to watch this video, but I suspect that's what's happening to Yang, is that he's just like, he probably misspoke or stepped in something that he didn't know anything about. And now everybody's like, oh, you're an anti-Semite. Or whatever. Shocked Pikachu. I bet, yeah. Why will no one work for my restaurant even after I put the all my potential employees are too lazy and spoiled to work for me sign up front? Maybe if I give an interview to the local news about how an extra $300 a week over minimum wage is unfathomably more than I'd ever offer a worker, that'll show what a wonderful place this is to work and inspire more applications. Yeah, that's exactly right. Like, boy howdy, if I was walking around handing out my resume right now and I walked up to a place that said my workers are lazy and stupid and don't want to work for me, I would just whistle and walk on by. Don't need to go in there. Don't need to waste my time. Wealth gap between Quebec and the rest of Canada. IRIS contradicts Legault. Okay. Talk about like a boring headline, eh? Doesn't this headline just put you to sleep? Wealth gap between Quebec and the rest of Canada. IRIS contradicts Legault. Like, I have to know so many different things about so many like small scale kind of stuff. And this is what they talk about instead of the Canadian Infrastructure Bank. If you think the violence happening in Palestine looks unsettling familiar to police brutality in the US, that's because the Israeli military trains our police departments. Yep. Don't forget, Palestinians were tweeting survival tips to Ferguson residents in 2015. Yep. That's just some hard, real truths right there. That's just some hard, real truths. I hope you guys are doing really well out there. I hope you're enjoying yourselves. This is a bit of a quiet chat. I think that's because there's less people here. Well, not by a lot, actually. Yeah, I hope you're all doing really well out there. I hope you're having a good time. Hope you're enjoying this stream. Hope everything's going well in your life. If you've got any question or anything, feel free to ask it in the chat. It's a beautiful Wednesday. I suspect there's people outside. Yeah, more of that, more of that. Yeah, Wall Street Bets. I love being on Wall Street Bets. These guys are hilarious. They're hilarious, man. The stuff that comes out of this particular subreddit. Does anyone else feel nervous as hell about making any substantial moves right now? Yeah, because like the stock market is poised to collapse, right? Like you take a look at what the billionaire class is doing and the moves that they're making and what they're doing with their money and what they're doing with their time and what they're focusing on. They're getting ready. They're getting ready for the collapse. Like all that would have to happen for the American economy to literally come to just like a screeching halt is for China and Russia. They probably need one more, so probably like the China, Russia, Iran group, right? To just stop trading in dollars. Just stop trading in dollars. Stop using the American dollar as the reserve currency. Just like make it the yuan, right? Like make it some other, make it Bitcoin. I don't know. But just stop trading in US dollars. Stop treating the US dollar as a reserve currency. And of course, they won't do that because if anything would set the Americans off on an actual world war, like actually invading and actually doing military moves in serious ways, it would be that, right? So, and also the Chinese do own a significant portion of American treasuries, so they don't necessarily, they have. Jeff, can you provide a link or send me in the direction? Because it is an inevitability, right? It is. America can't maintain its position, especially as oil begins to decline, and they don't actually have an exit strategy. Like America doesn't have an exit strategy, right? They've got all these nukes. They've got the largest military on the planet. Their economy is going to collapse, and they don't have an exit strategy. Their exit strategy is look big. That's not going to work. So yeah, not surprising is like, yeah, everybody should be nervous as hell, right? Invest in like water, invest in food, invest in land, like the billionaires do. Ontario should increase hotel quarantine length when COVID cases decline. Yeah, I mean now the quarantine hotels are getting infected, so no safe place. It's not too complicated to understand that brown children are being murdered and people are being displaced under the occupation of one of the most powerful armies in the world. It is willful ignorance to conflate these simple horrors with religion and geopolitics. Yeah, that's been my position, right? Israel is a military base, right? It's not a religious anything. It's not any of that. It's a military base, and that's how it should be treated. That all of the talk of like religious talk or any of that kind of stuff it's just a way to deflect or to pretend or to window dress or to obfuscate, right? Not interested. Not interested. Well, my little guy. Okay, guys, I'm going to take a 2-second break here. I'm going to give my little guy some peanut butter, okay? You want a bit more peanut butter, buddy? Peanut butter puppet time, peanut butter puppet time, peanut butter puppet time. Way back, way back, way back, way back. How you doing? How you going? Peanut butter puppet time. How you doing? How you going? Peanut butter puppet time, peanut butter puppet time. Peanut butter puppet time, peanut butter puppet time. Yep. Peanut butter puppet time, peanut butter puppet time. Milo's a good dog with a funny face. I hope you don't get peanut butter all over the place, 'cause you're a good dog. Ba-ba-bum, with a funny face. All right. Empty chair brought to you by... Yeah. Yeah. This is why we keep raising tension with Russia and China. Yeah. And I mean, the Russia-China situation is like... like America, like let's look at the map. Let's look at the map. It really does come down to the reality that the United States has isolated itself, right? Like, it is isolated in the first place, and during like the World War II Cold War period, that was actually a benefit. It was really good that they were somewhat isolated because it meant that like the Germans can't get over there very successfully, right? Like, it's very difficult for the communists to want to come on. What are they going to do? They're going to come up over here, but even then, like this is where Moscow is. Like, they're not going to go all the way over here to try to do some kind of invasion or anything like this. So it was a real benefit. And getting over the North Atlantic Ocean or through the North Pacific Ocean was actually difficult still, which isn't to say it's not still an undertaking. But now, right, now that China is actually successfully industrialized, has successfully modernized its economy, has taken control of the world's manufacturing, right? Not a small, insignificant thing. Now, like, look at who they can trade with. Well, they can trade with Russia, certainly. And as they build their Belt and Road Initiative, as they build like high-speed rail up into Europe, right? And then down over here into Africa, right? As they work with places like Madagascar to get ports and all this kind of stuff, right? They're going to be able to get infrastructure in all over the place, right? And so if the Americans keep putting sanctions on all these places, like America's put sanctions all over here, it's put it all over the place, right? So even if America takes over the South China Sea, right, which is sort of their goal with taking over Hong Kong and Taiwan and all these places, Thailand, even if they take this all over and prevent China from getting boats out, well, China's still got like all of this land connection, right? And so this is the reason why China's economy is going to go through the roof, while the Americans are like, put, I got a boat, put, right? Yeah. Like, it's not going to matter. And it's not like the Americans are creating anything in the first place. It's not like they make anything. And for God's sakes, like, none of these guys are that interested in trading with the United States. These guys are actively working to get rid of the United States. If Brazil tips and becomes a socialist nation or elects a socialist leader, right? That's the end of the United States and South America, man. Is there a Chinese stock market? Why do I feel confined to the North American markets? I mean, because you're a Canadian. You are confined to North American markets. There is a Chinese stock market, but it operates a little bit differently. Like, the whole capitalists will say this all the time about China, that like, oh no, the thing that made China rich was actually capitalism. That's what did it. And it's like, nah, really. Just because the Chinese have a stock market, right, and they do allow markets to exist in their borders, but their markets are tightly controlled and tightly regulated, and also focused on non-essential services, right? So like, China has gone like, it's perfectly fine if you want to have like a luxury good market. Why shouldn't you have a luxury good market? Why shouldn't we allow capitalists to exist in a luxury good market? A market that no one needs to be involved in, that isn't tied to your food or your shelter or any of this kind of stuff. And they have so many tight regulations on it. Like, here's a great example. Back in 2008, when we had the financial crash here in the United States, what happened? Who got punished for that? Nobody. All these guys got bailed out. They got given billions of dollars for the pleasure of collapsing the global economy, right? The global economy. China, nobody's ever done that kind of level of manipulation, but if you do market manipulation like that, they execute you, right? They have executed people for doing exactly what we're talking about in China, right? So they have tight regulations against the capitalists in their country, and the capitalists, on top of that, are confined to a very small segment of the economy overall. Whereas in the United States, the financialization of the entire economy has parasitized the whole thing. The Americans don't create anything. They don't have a real economy. They have no manufacturing base. They're just an army, right? They're just a military. That's really all they are. So saying that what China is doing is capitalism is like, well, not really. The analogy I like to use is it's like you're walking into someone's house right? And you see they've got a fireplace where there's a fire going, right? And they've got like, it's a stone fireplace where they've got like a grill and everything's protected and an ember is not going to come out. And they use it to cook with and they use it to heat their place and it's useful, right? And the Chinese will be like, look, fire is useful. And then you, a Western capitalist, right, will go, yes, fire is useful. We should let the fire out and let fire all over the place and let fire do what fire does everywhere because fire is so useful. That's what essentially what Western capitalists have argued and have done with capitalism. They've just allowed it to take everything over, and it has, to the detriment of the entire society, when it should be tightly contained in a corner, cordoned off, and if you want to engage in the fire, you got to like specifically open a thing, and there's safety precautions and all this kind of stuff. We got to put capitalism back in its cage and, you know, cook our food on top of it. The analogy's not perfect, but I think it still stands. I'd rather invest in Chinese projects than U.S. companies based on land access alone. Yep. China's just better well placed now, right? Like, the reason why the United States was well situated in the first place is because the capitalists had a big world war. They blew themselves up, right? Africa had been pillaged largely by European forces, right? So it wasn't much of a competitor. And China and Russia were both completely destroyed, as was Europe after. Like, so this whole place was completely destroyed post World War II, and it's only now that any of these places are actually getting back to a place where they can be like even considered on the same sort of level industrially, right? In terms of technology, Russia has always been a threat to the United States. Russia was the first nation into space, right? Like, but in terms of economic production and economic capacity, it really is looking like China is. And I mean, this isn't a theory, right? Joe Biden admitted this in his speech. Like his administration is very well aware that the Chinese economy is going to go. Which isn't to say that China doesn't have significant difficulties, that it's not facing significant internal trouble, that it's not like it has to deal with major situations. But like one of the major successes that they're dealing with, like you take a look on the map here, and a lot of this is like kind of wasteland, eh? Like a lot of this is not really usable land, and they're taking these regions and they're planting trees in here so that they can. Where was that one area? There was one area that was literally called like the Sea of Death because it was just a wasteland. And now they're planting trees there and it's actually becoming a big green area. The Chinese are like, they're making moves and they're doing stuff and they're going to be a big player. They're going to be a big player on the world stage for sure. For sure. And I mean, good for them, right? Good for them. Make it happen, China. You crazy guys. I know, planting trees, the evilness. Planting trees? Oh my god. We should be doing that, by the way. Like, the Liberal government has been planting trees, but like that should become like a major initiative. Like, everybody should have to plant like 1,000 trees. Like, everybody. We should make that like a major thing. We should build it into our school system. Like, we should be planting trees, tree planting. Like, that's what we should be doing. Yep, daily reminder that communism was always a project to end a wide array of oppressions, even if it isn't remembered that way. Yeah, people always forget that, like, people will take, like, modern day capitalism and compare it to, like, 1930s communism. And it's like, the communists were dealing with, like, a monarchy, like a literal monarchy, right? Like, they were dealing with like massive oppression and high scale abandonment by their ruling class, right? They weren't an industrialized nation. Like, anyway, capitalists. The only thing they're good at is propaganda. That's the only thing they're good at. Canadians fought in Afghanistan to support the U.S. and NATO, but died at much higher rate than Americans. Oh, weird. I mean, we shouldn't have fought in Afghanistan, to support the U.S. and NATO, and we should pull out of NATO, honestly. But that's a briar patch. That's an entanglement on a ridiculous level. We're so highly entangled in United States politics and NATO and all these other organizations that for us to actually stop being the villains on the world stage the way we are, it's going to be a long journey. It's going to be a long, long journey. Retail workers are leaving the industry over nightmare customers and low pay. Yeah. Yeah. Sudan's basic income scheme aims to ease economic pain. Yeah. A basic income works. It works for what it is, right? And you do still need to structure your economy to deal with the capitalists, because capitalists are, sociopathic death cultists who want to destroy everything. But a basic income works. It's worked every time. We should do it. You have the power to heal others. You are a villain. I am the American healthcare system. Yeah. Yeah.
Whenever
German finds out about tipping in the U.S.
Thank you.
Excuse me, young man. What means suggested gratuity?
It's just for the tips.
Suggests 20%.
If you think I did a good job.
You were most wonderful. But why such much?
That's standard.
20%.
20%.
For a tip?
Yes, sir.
This restaurant doesn't pay a wage?
Most of our income comes from tips.
The world-renowned Olive Garden, a multi-million-dollar franchise, does not have the money to pay its employees fairly and must therefore rely on the customer to pay a living wage.
That's just how it's done.
This is legal.
Yeah.
So with the delicious unlimited breadsticks, I have now been served a disgusting unlimited moral dilemma.
You don't have to tip.
Of course I do. You are forced to stand on your feet all day.
Yeah.
Work long hours. Do all of this.
I need to get new speakers, man.
Your employer does not pay you enough.
Helps keep business costs down.
Then the business should not exist. And this is customary in all Olive Garden establishments.
Sir, it's not just Olive Garden. It's all restaurants.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know why, I just think it's hilarious that he's using Olive Garden. and it's also funny that he's German. I don't know. The whole thing is funny. Brilliant. Breaking news. The LPAT, I don't know what the LPAT is, has approved the condo proposal over the rails by the ORCA project with no amendments. Rail Deck Park is officially dead. We will get 8 new condo towers built on top of the rails. Oh. Okay, so 8 new condos. Yeah. Whoopity-doo in Kalamazoo, right? 8 more condos that we don't necessarily need. Right? Just more housing to be bought by billionaires. Ontario launches online portal for essential businesses to access free rapid testing kits. Oh, good. Good. I'm generally just mail that out. Right? Why didn't we get, why wasn't it the case that at the beginning of the pandemic, why didn't everyone just get mailed a care package, right? Everybody should have just gotten mailed a care package with some masks, some hand sanitizer, right? That should have happened, straight away. Well, because the answer to that is we're not organized. We're not organized as a people. We've let the market decide, right? And my favorite part of that is that you had people who went and hoarded up a whole bunch of hand sanitizer, and then the feds came and took the hand sanitizer away, and I was like, but why? That's your system. That's how capitalism works, right? So it's bad if some poor guy does it, right? But if Wall Street does it, it's completely fine. In 1948, Albert Einstein and Hannah Arendt already warned that Israel was directed to fascism. The fascist organization they condemned, Herut, is the origin of Likud, Netanyahu's party, Israel's ruling party. Yeah, I mean it's It's pretty straightforward. Like it definitely is. Like its objectives are incredibly brutal and incredibly fascist. Is housing not housing? What do you mean, Barnabas? Like I should be happy to see these condos go up because housing is housing, right? But that's not what's going to happen, right? Like they're going to put these condos up, and they're just going to sell them to, or they're just going to keep them, right? They're just going to sell them to some billionaires who will just sit on them empty, right? Like maybe they'll sell them to like, you know, there'll be some rich guy somewhere who's like, oh yeah, I want a condo in that kind of place. But really it's the land. Like that's what they want. They just want the land. Like they don't really care about the housing, right? They just care about the land. Manufacturing consent in 4K. Do you support the protests, the violent protests? Do you support the violent dispossession of me and my family? Yeah, that's the conversation. Like, happening right in our faces. Saskatchewan Premier promises no Trudeau summer, more second COVID vaccine doses. Okay. I'm so soft on like the vaccine conversation. I've talked to people who are just like, oh, this vaccine rollout and all out. I'm just like, it's going to happen as it happens, bud. It's going to happen as it happens. And Canada's Maritime Launch Services announce funding for rocket launch vehicle and site in Nova Scotia. Yeah. Canada's Maritime Launch Services announced funding for rocket launch vehicle and site in Nova Scotia. I mean, that makes sense from a military perspective, right? Like, here's Nova Scotia, right? That's where you want. Like, if you're going to go... Yeah, I know. Hey, Onward, how you doing, bud? I think my viewer count is low right now. What is it? 9? Yeah. Because all you guys are out enjoying the beautiful day. How dare you? How dare you? You should be like me, staying in watching the news. Yeah, probably a little bit of space, Barnabas. Like, probably. Like, that makes a certain amount of sense. Why not? Like, why not have a launch pad out here? And then if something goes wrong, it's like off your coast. It's not centralized. All that kind of stuff. I was just talking about the gas shortage. Yeah, bud. You've turned me on to the gas. You're out in Atlanta, yeah? And how you say willin'? I don't know what you mean, but I've been doing a little bit of research on the gas shortage. It does seem like a lot of the gas shortages are self-inflicted. There's kind of a hysteria going around, and I mean some of that hysteria is not unwarranted, right? Like why are we not having a more serious discussion about the reality that we've hit peak oil? We're going over the edge of peak fuel. We're not going to suddenly get more fuel, right? Wouldn't that be awful? Wouldn't it be just terrible if, like, let's say 5 years from now, they actually found, like, an asteroid that just had huge amounts of oil deposits on it for whatever reason? It'd be such a disaster for us. just an excuse for these capitalists to keep this system lurching along, this zombie system, instead of letting it shamble to its death. And so we got to come up with a plan. Like we have to actually talk openly about that plan, and we have to talk openly about what's happening. Yeah, filling up kiddie pools full of gas. I wonder why there's a shortage. Yeah, exactly, bud. Like I've seen pictures of people filling up plastic bags, right? Like literal just like tubs. Yeah, like just like the dumbest shit, and they're just like filling up like massive containers. Yeah, there's a shortage because there's a hysteria going on because you have the doomerism that has always existed in the United States. There's always been these sort of like out in the boonies kind of doom and gloom guys who are prepared for, you know, the collapse of civilization and all this kind of stuff. Well, that's spreading, right? That's spreading, and it isn't completely unwarranted, honestly. Like the billionaire class in the United States is preparing for an economic collapse. most of the Western world is preparing for some kind of economic collapse. So, makes sense if you're a person who is like, what am I going to do if I don't have any fuel? I live out in the nowhere boony place, and I got a big old truck that needs a lot of gas, and I don't want to downsize it. I can't buy one of them fancy hybrids or a tiny fuel efficient car. I'm just going to get me all the gasoline I can carry. It's very logical. It makes all the sense in the world. It's just dumb. It's like at the beginning of the pandemic, when everybody ran out and got and there was a toilet paper shortage, right? It was just this like absurd hysteria. It was just a run on the commodity, and and eventually in our lifetimes we're going to be faced with that, right? We're going to be faced in our lifetimes with a genuine shortage that is being caused because we're running out of fuel and we haven't transitioned away from fuel fast enough, right? And we're not doing anything about it. We're not putting up a plan. People are acting a little weird. 2 cars were just parked against an intersection. 2 guys were leaning against the cars on their phones. Yeah, dude, things are going to get weirder. Things are going to get weirder, man. It's just going to get weirder. And, it's going to get more obvious, and things are going to get more strange. And, gangs are going to start showing up, right? Because sections of America have already been abandoned, right? The abandonment is palatable in many American states, and that abandonment is just going to continue. It's just going to get worse, and eventually the citizenry is going to start making decisions for itself, and what that looks like is the erection of gang organizations, right? What are called gang organizations, but are collections of citizens who have nowhere else to go. And they weren't out of gas because they drove off after a while. Well, maybe they were trying to keep other people from getting gas so that their buddy could come and get gas, right? They didn't want the gas to run out, so they were keeping other people away. That's just a guess. It's looking positive for Ottawa students to return to school by end of May. Top doctor. Who's the top doctor? Who's the top doctor? Ottawa's medical officer of health, okay, suggests students could return to class for in-person learning before the end of the school year as COVID. At this stage in the game, why bother? I just don't get why take the risk. I understand why they're in this, rush to get kids back into school because they want their parents to be able to go back to work, right? But, it just seems like it's flirting. It's just flirting with disaster, which is what we've always done. Right? We're just constantly flirting with disaster. Anyway, I'm just so tired of us actually selling ourselves to capitalists. I wish we would just stop selling ourselves to capitalists.
I'm going to show you modern day segregation. Come on.
Systemic racism's not a thing.
I'm going to show you modern day segregation.
There we
Come
go.
on. This is a nice little neighborhood here in Inglewood, California, but it's also right next to a freeway. Now, all I did was go to the other side of the freeway, and the neighborhood is, pretty much the same. Doesn't look that much different, but guess what? For some reason, houses on this side of the freeway cost twice as much as they do over in Inglewood. I'm sure the racial divide on either side of that freeway is just a coincidence, huh? And I'm sure the fact that Inglewood was redlined back in the 30s as hazardous has nothing to do with that either. And the extensive single-family only zoning on the west side compared to multifamily zoning on the east side also has nothing to do with it. See, first they redlined the whole city so that certain people could only live in certain neighborhoods. Then they changed the zoning laws to limit the number of houses that were allowed in a nice area. And then they built all these freeways to wall off the bad neighborhoods from the good one, and destroyed a bunch of homes with people of color in the process. LA doesn't just stay this segregated by accident. These damn freeways keep it that way.
Nice quick reporting coming out of TikTok right there. That's great. I'm saving this one. That's great. And then I just did a report on Rex Murphy's most recent disaster, where he denies the existence of systemic racism. Like this kind of stuff, it's like right in our faces now. And like you got great sources like this guy. Oh, there's a lot going on in the chat all of a sudden. Did they get into an accident or something and exchanging contacts or something? That's what I thought at first, senor, but they drove off together as if they were friends. There was a literal parking lot across the street. That is very weird. On the other hand, I was sitting here last night at 2 a.m. with the window open, feeling the cool breeze, and it was the quietest I've heard Atlanta in years. Is it that broad that talks crap all the time? Haju or Tam? I don't know what you're saying there, Ruth. Yeah. That is going to be one of the benefits onward of a gas shortage and of sort of the eventual decline is that there's just going to be less cars, right? And got to tell you, I'm looking forward to it. There are so many times that I'm like walking around neighborhoods and I'm like, man, this neighborhood is beautiful. And there's like beautiful trees and the houses are beautiful and there's like kids playing on the street and everything's great, but it's just littered with cars. And these cars are so stupid. Like, cars are stupid. Like, they're so stupid looking. They smell bad. They're noisy, right? And like, and they're all designed to like sell to like some 20-year-old who's just like, it needs to look sleek and cool and yeah, but still sit 15 people. It's like, come on. Got to take it where you can. Yeah, that's true though. That's true. Like it's like. Rural people or even people in smaller communities, like if you don't have a car, like you're cut off, right? Like you do need a vehicle. I'm just moaning about, like, if we took the money that we as a people spent on cars and we had put it into transit infrastructure, we would have an incredible infrastructure, an incredible transit infrastructure in this country. It would be absolutely stellar. Instead, we individualized everything and said to everybody, oh, you got to have a car or you're a less person, right? Became a very cultural sort of a thing. I would be very happy to see an expansion of public transportation and walkability of urban areas. Yeah, and that's going to become more and more necessary, bud. Senor Minecrafter 2020? Okay. Are you German, bud? Or that's a very eclectic name. I'll put it that way. There's a lot going on there. Yeah, I'd be happy to see an expansion of public transport. And it's going to become necessary, right? Like, making cities more bikeable, making it so bike lanes are more prominent. I read an article that says that France, in Paris, I think it was Paris, that they have a freeway that they are reclaiming and going to turn into green space because there's just less cars, right? And they don't actually need this like eyesore, right? So they're going to just turn it into wonderful parkland for their city residents to enjoy, which is great. Yeah, Ottawa, public transit does suck in Ottawa. I lived in Ottawa for a year, and it really does suck. It's like one bus. It's like, oh, come on. Like, it should be so much better. All those beautiful streets are old neighborhoods. The new ones are solitary. Yeah. Yeah. No, and it's just going to become more and more plain that we are just going to need more infrastructure. I just read the federal government is giving the city of Toronto and surrounding regions like $12 billion, which makes complete sense. Like, so much happens through the city. It is a federal issue. It should be treated as a federal issue. And the... oh, what's up, buddy? We're out of peanut butter, buddy. Here, chew on your bone, okay? Chew on your bone. You want to chew on your bone? Want to chew on your bone? There's no more peanut butter, buddy. Go get it. Okay, you know what? You're going to come up on the lap now. We're going to do... Oh, I know. Oh, I know. Oh, I know. Oh, you're not happy about this one. I know. He grumbles like I do. You can see, eh? Get him up on my lap. He's just like... But he's a sweet guy. Little Milo break, little Milo break, little Milo break, little Milo break, little Milo, little Milo, Milo break. It's so badass when people stand in front of shit they destroy. Kenny. Jason Kenny, man. just like all these conservatives, right? He just got into power to make money for himself. That's the long and short of it. And now people are starting to realize it. If you think conservatives are Nazis, then you don't know much about history. Today's conservatives are as close to Nazism as 8th grade basketball is to the NBA. So, literally playing the same sport, but they're just incompetent at it. I agree. Okay, buddy. Okay. No more peanut butter. We're out of peanut butter. Here, maybe I can give you a little bit more. Okay. That's it, though, buddy. Okay. Dogs, man. Dogs. Your plans for this upcoming stretch of amazing weather? Go out and enjoy it, man. Go out and enjoy it. I mean, I should be encouraging you to stay at home and watch my stream. But if you can go outside and enjoy the beautiful weather, you should do that. Positively. I got out for a couple hours, just sat out on the grass with my dog. It was absolutely beautiful. Canadian media. Murderous Israeli apartheid state funded by the 1%. Palestinian civilians. Canadian media. This is perfectly balanced. Both sides are dangerous. Yeah. Comparing the Canadian media to Thanatos. Or Thanos? Is it Thanos or Thanatos? Thanos. You can tell I don't know that much about that kind of stuff, or I don't care that much. We already saw this.
Whenever you're ready.
Oh, chat doesn't let me put in URLs. Yeah, I noticed that. I wish it would. Is there something you want me to search up, buddy? I'll just search it up. And I don't know what this tiny URL thing, like if I copy this, does this actually do anything? No. Just ask me to search something up. I'll go take a look. Peel walk. Who would win? A racist apartheid regime henchman? A soapy boy? There's gotta be a bigger story here. The youth played the ground with soap and the police went sliding away. Really? Oh, that's hilarious. I'd love to see that. China-Russian currency. Oh, wow. They've already announced it, eh? Usually this kind of thing I find out about because it's like a leak or something like this, but last month the United States broadened financial sanctions against China, which is a mistake, big mistake to do that. Because if we take a look at the map, like, okay, so the United States put sanctions on China, put sanctions on Russia, put sanctions on Iran, put sanctions all over Africa, put sanctions all over South America. Like, who aren't they putting sanctions on? There really is going to come a point where there's going to be more people, there's going to be less people that they've put sanctions on, that there's going to be less people they haven't put sanctions on, right? And, like, if they put sanctions on everybody over here, these guys are just going to look at one another and... right? Yeah, this is the Entente are unlikely to kick the dollar to the curb. Okay. You're telling me like 1 billion people here. Russia doesn't actually have that big a population, but I think it's like 200 million. Let's get our numbers right. Population of Russia. Oh, okay. So 144 million. So 1 billion people in China, right? 144 million here. Right, you're telling me that like 10% of the world's population, like 15% of the world's population, no longer trades in the dollar. That's going to have an impact. Like, if China and Russia devise successful alternatives to the dollar-centered financial system, and if these alternatives gain significant international traction, we would be witnessing a cataclysmic moment in great powerful rivalry. Currency unipolarity has been a defining feature of the entire post-war era. No currency, not even the euro, has ever come close to rivaling the scale of the US dollar around the world. An end to America's dollar primacy and status as a financial hub could mean an end to US macroeconomic perks. I wonder what they mean by that. Macroeconomic perks. Honestly, that literally just like the United States uses its position as the reserve currency to continue its systemic wage slavery of the entire world. A declining role for the dollar could also undermine the practice of dollar deterrence, the U.S. government's ability to threaten or deny foreigners access to dollar clearing and therefore dollar settlement, which that's what they're doing to Venezuela, right? All these conservatives are like, oh, look at Venezuela, but like this is what they're doing to Venezuela. That Venezuela has had an embargo put on it. Everybody couldn't, if you want to trade oil on the world market, you have to trade in the dollar because the dollar is actually connected directly to oil. And if the U.S. says you can't, if they put an embargo on a country for the trading of oil, well, that means they can't trade their oil, right? That's why the embargo or the sanctions in Venezuela were so devastating, and so this so if they create another currency, what are they going to call it? Have they called it anything? Do you know, Jeff? Do you know if they actually called it anything? What the China and Russia announced joint pledge to push back against dollar, but what are they calling it? Will this like they called the euro the euro for obvious reasons. It's in Europe, right? The dollar is a dollar, right? Like the yuan exists, the ruble exists. What about what are they going to call this? All right, they're not going to tell us. If China cannot access dollars, this could jeopardize its Belt and Road Initiative, a cornerstone of Beijing global ambitions. Involving dollars. In addition, yeah, I'm not sure either. It's probably because it's just in the preliminary stages. The fact that they've announced it, though, is a big deal. And honestly, like, if anything should get these Americans to start thinking about lifting those sanctions, it's this reality. Like, these guys cannot. China and Russia have vowed to jointly de-dollarize, creating alternatives to the current system with a 3-step plan that began a few years ago. First, both countries began to cut back the proportion of their bilateral trade invoices in dollars, privileging settlement in their own currencies. Yeah, good idea. Second, they sought to boost the renminbi's role as an international currency for payments and reserve to encourage wider adoption of its currency. I've got to save this. I'm going to bookmark this one. This is a great link. This is a great article, bud. Thanks for directing me this way. To encourage wider adoption of its currency, China has given more than 30 countries access through bilateral swap agreements. China and Russia scaled back their treasury holdings. That's huge. China and Russia scaling back their U.S. treasury holdings is enormous. With Russia channeling cash into renminbi holdings, I need to look into what this is. Russia dumps from dollar reserves to pivot to China. All right, I'll take a look at that later. China's money. Okay. And this is what I love about this chat and what we're doing here is like small little things come up that I'm not familiar with or I don't know that much about, and you guys can really help direct me to lots of great, wonderful stuff. I'm probably going to do one of my shorter videos on this because this is a big deal. Like, this is a big deal. And I'm glad to see, like, at least the Washington Post is talking about it, but it seems like it's not very present in our media. The third and last leg of these efforts aims to create alternative payments and messaging systems, allowing the country to use home and partner currencies instead of dollars. Yep. And there's no reason they can't do this, right? Like, if they can start trading, and like you think about, like, let's go to our fancy map, right? You think about poor Venezuela, right? Like, Venezuela used to just trade with America just like this. Really easy. It's a really easy trade for them to make, right? And then they put sanctions on Venezuela. And so now poor Venezuela has to go get all their stuff over to China, right? Oh, it's a total disaster for them. right? They can't actually get anything done. And or they could go like boop doop doop down and around this way. Do they have access to the Panama Canal, do you think? Right? If they have access to the Panama Canal, maybe. But which would be nice, then they could just be like and they send it over this way. That's pretty clear, but still, compare that to like doik doik doik. And they currently can't trade that oil even to China because China and Russia need to accept it in dollars, right? They need to trade in dollars. So if China can just be like, no, we're not trading in dollars anymore, we'll trade in our own currency. And so Venezuela can trade the oil to China, and then China will trade them, goods and services, right? It's just like a credit system. No, it's going to be great news for a lot of these countries, like a lot of these South American countries that have been colonized and destroyed over and over again by America. Where is that article? This strategy has its limits. Of course, it's still the Washington Post, right? So it's still an imperialist rag. While these efforts could undermine the dollar's long-term primacy, so far China and Russia have only made small dents in a robust structure. Significant obstacles include the long-standing Russia-China rivalry, which is sure to inhibit Russia's readiness to promote the renminbi. I can't pronounce this word. Renminbi. I don't know why I'm struggling with that word. It's right there. Renminbi. 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 I don't know why I'm struggling. The ensnaring effects of dollar hegemony and dollar deterrence are real concerns for some countries, as well as companies within nations whose politics do not sit well with Washington. Okay. Here's the conclusion. The long-term effect of China and Russia's measures could nonetheless be considerable. Agreed. Even if China and Russia fail to offer better alternatives, the more dollar deterrence is used, the more countries will seek options that reduce their vulnerability to this foreign policy tool. It is an enormous deal. This should be like really, really important front page news. I'm surprised. The article, when did this article come out? It came out in April, I saw, April 9th. Yeah, I feel like I should have run into this already. I'm a bit disappointed. Thanks so much for sharing that, bud. That's a really good one. Yeah, mainstream. I've been noticing the news is pretty quiet generally right now. And when I get it happens from time to time where the mainstream gets really quiet. They don't really report on anything. Things are just kind of like little tiny add-ons or aspects to other things. And that's usually just setting the table for the big story that suddenly springs, right? So I'm actually expecting a big story to be right in front of us really soon. Living in a country that wants to be / thinks it's number one is exhausting. I'll take number 25 in healthcare. Yeah, bud. Yeah. Funny story about Dave says, funny story about that. Assad's, Gaddafi, and Saddam all wanted to move away from selling their oil reserves through the petrodollar. Coincidentally, these guys became terrorists immediately after. Yep. Just a coincidence. Yep. Yeah. You're absolutely right, bud. You're absolutely right. That, like, lots of countries have wanted to move away from the dollar. And I've seen some pretty convincing literature that says that a big reason why Iraq got invaded when it did was because they were moving away from the dollar, that they were starting to trade in other currencies. And Saddam was also starting to make good decisions for his citizens, right? That he was attempting to do good stuff. Anything. I shouldn't even say good stuff, but just like anything of any value for his own citizens. And that's the story of Gaddafi as well. Like, there's this great Gaddafi story where he said, I will not house my own father until every Libyan owns a house. And he made good on that promise. So and Assad, I mean, I don't know that much about Assad, honestly. I feel like the Syrian situation, like this whole thing is such an explosive cluster that you got to pick your battles. And I don't genuinely know that much about Assad. I do know that the gas attacks were fabricated. I do know that the Cassius Belli for going in and destroying the region was completely fabricated. But I don't actually know that much about Assad as a ruler or as a person. But yeah, they're all trying to do that. And now that China is also doing it, and Russia is doing it, right? Like, suddenly if you think like, okay, Iran starts to do it, India starts to do it, right? Pakistan starts to do it, right? If you start to create like a coalition of people who are trading in a currency that is other than the dollar, and this is just going to keep going and keep going and keep going. Yeah, China and Russia are also exporting vaccines to developing nations because they fundamentally understand that it's in their best interests to do so, right? What are the major thing that this century is going to teach Westerners, right? We cannot worship money. That money worship is the reason we are going to experience the collapses that we're about to experience. That we are not treating money for what it is, which is as a tool, or a technology if you prefer, but a tool that we use in order to just smooth transactions in a complex society, right? And we've elevated money to this point of worship, where if money says it should happen, then all praise money. The free market will decide. The invisible hand, right? Like, we might as well, like, we've erected these temples that we call banks, and we just worship money completely, and we're putting that money and that worship of money between our objectives. We're wedging it between ourselves. Everyone on this map should be vaccinated. And it's in our interests to have that happen. Why is that not going to happen? Why are many of these African nations not going to get vaccinated? Why is India not going to get vaccinated? Why are these places not going to get vaccinated? Why are South America? Why is the global South not going to get vaccinated? Well, the global South is not going to get vaccinated because it's not going to make pharma care companies money, right? In fact, it might lose them a little bit of money to do that. So, no, we're not going to vaccinate those places. Meanwhile, places like Russia and China, who don't worship money, who are actually saying things like, hey, our citizens' lives and their well-being matter more, right? Who do things like forgive debts, right? Who do things like just like, oh, the money is getting in the way of what we want to achieve, so we'll just get rid of it. We'll just not forget it, right? They're taking vaccines and they're sending them into these countries because they're like, yeah, get vaccinated. Get vaccinated. If you guys don't get vaccinated, this is going to come back. And it is. And it is. Because we're dumb. And it is our fault. China and Russia doing that is a tactic to solidify themselves as the new power nurturers. Don't pretend their intentions are 100% benevolent. But that's not evil, right? Like it's not evil to want to position yourself as a new world power nurturer, right? Like, why shouldn't they do that? Right? That to me is it. It's not that much different than like I'm saying like I'm in a room with a group of people and I'm going around giving people gifts, right? And somebody says, "Oh, you're just giving people gifts so they'll think you're a good person," and I'm like, "Yeah, like sure," and like absolutely there is probably like a cynical aspect to it where they're like, yeah, this will foment goodwill, and then we'll be able to get a good trade deal later and all that kind of stuff. So, like, you're literally just describing politics. Like, that's how politics works. When Trump took power and started isolating the USA and stopping to help needy countries, Russia stepped in a bit. Yeah, there's a bit of necessity. Well, and Russia is like, as much as, like, it has all this land, sure, but, like, not all of it is great land. Like, it's not great usable land. And they're not like that resource rich. Like they're not like, and they don't have this that big a population, right? The idea that they're like boogeymaned at all anymore to me is kind of a joke, right? It's so funny to listen to Putin. Like listen to some conversations because Putin's a baller. Like he doesn't give a fuck. Listen to some of the conversations that Putin has about the propaganda that comes out of America. He thinks it's a joke, man. He's mainly concerned about the American citizens and how they're just being completely duped about everything. Their actions have good outcome, but I don't trust them once they obtain this power. Yeah, I see where you're coming from there, Dave. I mean, my hope on this is that we have a conversation where we accept that China and the Chinese people are people, right? Oftentimes this conversation can get really entrenched in in kind of a and I'm not accusing you of xenophobia by any stretch of the imagination, but I am saying it does kind of get caught in a like, I'm suspicious of them because they are not us, you know? That I'm suspicious of China just because I'm suspicious of China because they're not us. And my hope is that I would prefer to say I'm suspicious of them because they are also a group of people, you know? So I understand that that's kind of like a small shift in how to talk about it or how to perceive the situation. But yeah, I definitely see what you're saying. Like we shouldn't think it's all rosebuds over there because it isn't. But they are having successes. And I don't know, giving away vaccines seems like a good idea. Seems like a good thing to do. Of course there's an Indian variant. Of course there's an Indian variant. These guys are burning bodies in their streets. Like, what's happening in India is like a total disaster, dude. It's like a total disaster. And of course they have a variant. If a variant comes in and sweeps across the globe again and knocks out all our vaccines and everything, it is going to come from India. For sure it will. You have an incredibly poor population, a current fascist government in power, blended with like intense poverty. Nobody can get the vaccine, right? And everybody's like tightly packed in together, and they don't have the privilege of just like staying home, right? Yeah, and like they're burning bodies in the streets. Like, yeah, there's gonna be a variant come out of there. I miss when Indian variants meant their spice choices for curry recipes. Yeah. I hate the Chinese government. I have nothing against the people. Just like Israel, not anti-Semitic, but I don't like the government. You know what, Dave? I think you and I are going to respectfully disagree with one another. I think that the Chinese government generally operates for the benefit of its people. And I think that oftentimes what can happen is that Westerners can look at China and the Chinese government and see the Chinese government doing something that we would never accept. Like, China will relocate populations. Here's a great example, right? It will just relocate populations. Like, to when they built the Three Gorges Dam, which I forget what the Three Gorges Dam. Three Gorges Dam. Yeah. When they built the Three Gorges Dam, which is the largest dam in the world, right? Right over here. To do it, they had to relocate 3 cities worth of people. I'm from Manitoba originally, so the city of Winnipeg. They had to relocate 3 Winnipeg-sized cities in order to build the Three Gorges Dam, and they just did it, right? And the Chinese people were fine with that. Well, fine, but like they went along with it. They did it, right? And yeah, it's like every infrastructure project, right? It needs upkeep. And one thing to remember about the Chinese, and I've read some interesting articles on this as well. Like, they had a big surge in building, right? A lot of companies built a lot of had a big construction infrastructure, crazy stuff, but they don't necessarily have the technological know-how to do any of that, right? They industrialize so quickly, but they don't really know what they're up to, right? And so they're learning as they go in many cases, and also using inferior materials. Like, that's just the truth. They're just using inferior materials because that's what they have access to, but they are invested in building these and then like rebuilding them, right? If you understand me, like they'll build a project, it'll fall over, and then they'll rebuild it, right? They don't get married to stuff the way that we do, and they don't think much about rebuilding stuff. And but they are trying to do these things for the benefit of their own people, and they are trying to do these things in this ongoing, unfolding project. It's a multi-generational project. Okay, guys, sorry. If you hear that in the background, that's my little dog. I gotta save him. I gotta save him from this. He just gets caught in this, like, sorting kind of thing. buddy. Okay, buddy. Here you go. 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 Good boy. Good boy. Okay, buddy. Come here. Come here. Here. Sit. Sit. Here you go. Here you go. Oh, pretty boy. Pretty boy. Okay, buddy. That's a bad one, eh? That's a bad one. It's usually stopped by now. That's a bad one. That's a bad one. Oh. Okay. Okay. Oh, no. There it goes. There it goes. Okay. That's a bad one, buddy. Oh, you're doing great, though. You're doing great. You're a good boy. Got a little bit more. Sit. Good boy. Okay, okay, okay. That one's a fake one. I know that's a fake one. Here you go, buddy. A little cheese there, too. You good? You good? Oh, no. Okay, buddy. Just one more attempt. One more attempt. Here you go, buddy. Here you go. Here you go. That's a good boy. Okay. Okay. No more. Good boy. Okay, guys. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Yeah. Poor dog can't breed. Who made this breed? Funnily enough, the Chinese. The pug is actually the oldest breed that we know of, and the only reason we don't know more about the pug is because the monastery that was raising pugs, the monastery that was responsible for breeding pugs, got invaded by a warlord in like the 14th century and got destroyed, and all the records of the breeding process got destroyed. He is okay. He is okay, Barnabas. Thank you for your concern. It's just like his. So if you think about like your hard palate, his hard palate is just like ever so slightly too far back, and so he can get caught in this kind of loop where he's just sort of choking on it. That's what's happening, and so that causes like a gag, right? And then he snorts back, and then he gags, and then he snorts back, and then he gags, and he snorts back, and so I try to like give him a little cheese, which he loves cheese, and I try to give him a little something, and that helps break the cycle sometimes. And usually it does, but in this particular case, it didn't work. Good boy, you did good. You did good. 1 second, guys, just gonna give him some treats. That was a good boy. Here, come here. Oh, yeah, good boy. And 100 years ago, like, we have pictures. I'm a bit upset by his ancient lost pug heritage, honestly. Like, I think that the thing that really messed the pug up, because if you look at older pictures and older video of pugs, their snout was much longer. Their legs were actually a little bit longer. And I'd be very surprised if they had any of the breathing issues or anything like this. The thing that really hurt the pug was when Europeans got a hold of it and started interbreeding them with, that's where you get like the Boston Terrier, that's where you get the Bulldog, all this kind of stuff. And then they started to puppy mill them. And the thing with the pug is if you start to puppy mill them, all of the, health issues that you can kind of keep on the outskirts suddenly become very present. And no, there's all kinds of wild. So this monastery I was just talking about, like one of their breeding practices, pugs used to only be able to be owned by Chinese royalty. It was against the law for anyone but Chinese royalty to own them. And they, the most sought after pugs were the ones that had the Chinese symbol for the word prince in the forehead of the pug. You know how pugs have like wrinkles and stuff? Well, you could breed it so that it would actually have symbols in Chinese words. I've seen, even in the modern era, there are breeders who will breed like shapes and diamonds and things like this into their pugs. Good boy, buddy. You did really great. You did really great. Bye, Dave. Bye, Dave. It's a shame that Dave left because we were having a good conversation there about China, and my thing about China is that like it's fine to critique China, and it's fine to be aware of China, and also to be aware of China just as like a group of humans. Like that already by itself, like it's a group of humans. It's of course it's going to be a total disaster, but I find that oftentimes the conversation about China can come from just like I'm suspicious just because they're not us, and I try to always flip that. I try to well, let's imagine that they are us. Let's imagine that they're where we are, right? Let's imagine all of that kind of stuff. I prefer small dogs, but I haven't had any pets for a decade. Yeah, pets are great, dude. My dad had a dog for a long time, and then he went and got another dog after a golden retriever, beautiful dog we named Sandy. She passed away, and then he got another dog, and immediately had to give that dog away because he was like, "Oh yeah, I forgot. When you get dogs at first, they're insane. You have to like train them, and they have an intense amount of energy, and they're just ridiculous." Yeah. He wanted like an old dog that he could come home to. Yeah, that's a good point. And honestly, dude, like I live by myself now, but I got Milo when I was with a partner, and she and I, like, I wouldn't have got him if I hadn't had a partner. And I think I do okay by him, and I think we treat him pretty good. It's helpful that he's older now. But it would be really mean to a dog to just be a single owner, especially one that's not around all along. I don't know why nobody expected this. The Chinese own us, bring manufacturing back. Yeah, we do need a manufacturing sector back. Just I don't understand how that's not seen as a national security issue. Like we should be able to build our own stuff. It seems pretty clear. But the reality, Ruth, is that it was this ideology of free marketism, right? This like just let the market decide, and the market always makes good. It's that worship of money. It's the worship of the free market. Ward, I know very little about how the Chinese government/economy is set up. Can you explain it? I'll do my best. I'll do my best for you, China. I'll do my best, China. Take all of this with a little bit of a grain of salt. I am not an expert, okay? But I do know a little bit about this. So in and around the World War II period, right, the Chinese, there is a upswell of communism throughout China, and the Chinese Communist Party defeats the Chinese Imperial Army in order to become the ruling class and institute itself as the primary body, okay? So everybody exists in China under the umbrella of the Chinese Communist Party. Now, this has been misunderstood in the West to mean that China is ruled by a dictatorship. No. The Chinese Communist Party itself has elections, right? They have democratic discussion and democratic debate within its own structure. And there are wings within the Chinese Communist Party. So it's structured more like American democracies than we like to admit. That there is healthy democratic debate within the Chinese, within the Communist Party. It's just, it all happens in the umbrella of the Communist Party, right? This is why you can have presidents elected in China, right? Like, why do they elect a president unless it's an actual democracy, right? It's not direct democracy. Like, you are not voting for the president, but you are voting for a representative who then goes to the larger body, who then votes for another representative, and it creates that classic hierarchical pyramid that we're all familiar with, and then eventually a president gets elected out of that. And so there is a democratic form in there, and it is like a representative democracy. And because they are not... And to me, the success of China is that... how is their economy set up? It's state-run manufacturing, basically. Like, they own the manufacturing for the world. They manufacture everything, right? They're manufacturing everything. Them and like India, right? Like, so they've got huge manufacturing sector, a huge construction sector, right? And most of it, major sections of it, are state-run and operated, right? So, okay, buddy, thank you, buddy. So you'll have like like we would have a crown corporation here in Canada, right? They have like a very similar sort of thing where there's a state-run apparatus where the state controls it, hires everybody, does all this kind of stuff, and it ends up being something of a state capitalist kind of structure within that. And the Chinese are very aware that they're in a transition, that the goal the goal will eventually be to take some of these institutions and instead of having them be directly controlled through elected representatives who then appoint people to control these industries, the goal is to then have the people who are actually doing the work be the people who are controlling that industry, right? With a certain level, like they always want to have a certain level of state representation, as long as that state representation is still within like a democratic framework. That seems fine by me, right? And so China has like the Chinese Communist Party body, and that's the primary body, and then you can have like individual capitalists who do exist in China in certain industries, but they're always underneath this umbrella, right? Whereas the American system is literally like, get rid of this. This is the problem. This needs to go away. Kings. Everybody needs to be kings. And if the regulatory body comes along and attempts to regulate anything, these guys lose their minds, right? And because the amount of capital that is accrued in the United States exists to the level that it does, this pile of money is so huge and ridiculous that when the state sector shows up, it's like, meh, meh, and they just take it over and absorb it, right? Whereas in China, like Harvard has actually done some really interesting studies in China and has done some interesting polling in China, and showing that the Chinese people are very pleased with their government. Like they're very happy with how their government is operating. There's in some regions the number is as high as 90% support, right? I've never seen it lower than 80, right, in China, and so that's simply because the Chinese people understand what poverty is. They have lived in poverty. They've seen what that looks like, and they've seen how fast and how quickly the Chinese government is attempting to progress the country. They see it, like they literally see it happen in front of them in very short order, where like there was nothing here 2 years ago and now there's a city, right? Like that's the kind of expediency and the speed we're talking about. So the Chinese government is democratic. It's not the same type of democratic structure that we have, but it is democratic. And that democratic structure is largely in control of a centralized economy, where the state takes a look at something, makes decisions, and moves forward with it. And instead of the capitalists being the ones saying the state needs to get out of our way, it's the state that tells the capitalists to get out of the way. And that seems to be the reason why the Chinese economy is going to overtake, because ultimately capitalists only care about themselves, whereas the government is responsive to the people who elect it. They talked about the national security implications of having no domestic manufacturers for about a month, then it disappeared. Yeah, because the capitalists don't care, right? The capitalists have made it very clear that, like, if America suddenly becomes like a total shithole, right? Even more so than it already is. Like, no offense to any of the American brothers out there and sisters, but if it becomes like unlivable, right? They'll just leave. They'll just leave. They'll just go to Spain or France or like find an island out here. Here you go. Go live out here, right? Like these guys, they have more money than they know what to do with, right? They'll just buy like a little island out in Tasmania that becomes a shithole. Yeah, I was trying to be polite. I was trying to be polite onward. But yeah, they'll just like go to the Dominican or whatever, right? They'll just leave. They've been saying that they're going to leave forever. Anytime we're like, hey, maybe we should raise taxes on the wealthy are like, well, we'll just leave. And I'm starting to be like, well, I'll pack your bags, right? I'll pack your bags. Is it a valid fear that Chinese-style governance will sweep the West? I mean, I don't think it's a valid fear. I think it's a valid observation or concern, right? We should want to use systems that work, shouldn't we? We should want to use systems that have better outcomes than our own systems. We should hope that such a system will sweep the West and that these capitalists will become tightly regulated and subservient to elected officials. I mean, I feel like that's something that we should... I mean, fear, I guess if you're pro-capitalist, you should fear it. But I'm not pro-capitalist. I am a communist. So, I mean, it's something to pay attention to. It certainly is something to pay attention to. Like, and we should pay attention to it. Because I don't necessarily believe that should some kind of pro-government movement come up in Western-style democracies, that that movement would be necessarily anti-capitalist, right? Like, you've got to remember what fascism actually is, right? Fascism is the merger of the business sector and the government sector. That's why the Canadian Infrastructure Bank is so dangerous. That's why the Federal Reserve is so dangerous. That if you entrench private ownership into the government, you have fascism, right? And so if such a culture suddenly started to say, no, we need the government to start taking things over, well, you've merged your government and your private sector. So if you just want the government to start doing things instead of the private sector to start doing things, but these two things are still merged, you still have fascism. Whereas what we need to do is we need to decouple these, get rid of the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, for example, and then subserviate capital to the democracy, right? And diminish it, get it fucking out the door. But is the Chinese way the best? Even the Chinese don't say their way is the best. That if you actually read their documents, right? And there's this really great guy on YouTube called Bay Area... I'm going to find him quickly. Bay Area. Come on. Maybe I can do that and that'll be enough. No. He's like this brilliant resource who, oh, you know what? He's going to be in my notifications. There he is. This guy. Bay Area 415. Bay Area 415. This guy is brilliant. I think everybody should go and subscribe to him right now. He is an absolutely brilliant resource. He is a lawyer that works out of California. And you can see he wears a mask and all this kind of stuff to keep his identity secret, which he says he does to protect the people around him. Less himself, but the people around him. And given the long anti-communist history that exists throughout the United States, it's hard to blame him for wanting to do this. But he learned about China and socialism with Chinese characteristics. A ton of great videos, if you want to know more about China, you want to know more about this kind of stuff, he's going to talk to you about it. And China, one thing that really I walk away from, and anytime I do any research on China or anything like that, I really walk away from the table being like, oh, here is a culture that understands it's in a large-scale, unfolding, multi-generational project, right? That We don't understand that here in a capitalist society, right? Which is why we can say stupid things like, when has communism ever worked? It's like, well, communism is like a long-scale, unfolding, like, like, it's not just going to spring up out of nowhere. It's not just going to appear, right? Like, it's going to take a lot of time. And what the Chinese people really want to see, and what their government wants to do, is to constantly be progressing towards this sort of unknown vision. And it really is like an unknown vision. Like, you can have ideas about it. Like, you can have like a Star Trek utopia kind of idea that you can sort of progress to. And as long as they're sort of attempting to create something that is egalitarian, that is better than what we were doing before, right? Which in China is definitely the case. Like, it's definitely the case that what they're doing is better than what they were doing before. And as long as you're unfolding your society and not regressing it and progressing it, constantly moving forward and moving towards this goal, and then, like, and what the Chinese do, right? They release economic reports. And so they release an economic report and they say, these are our goals. Then they meet those goals. And then they release another economic report, right? And their economic reports are about 10 years. So they'll have like a 10-year report of like, these are the lessons we learned over the last 10 years. This is what we'd like to see for the next 10 years. And then they go in that direction. And of course they fail, right? Of course there are failures. Of course there are things that don't work. Of course they... And what you're saying here onward is exactly what I'm talking about. It's not that America is a total shithole. It's that every moment it's as good as it will ever be because it gets worse every year. And it's because there's no plan, right? It's because America doesn't make a plan. They've just decided that the free market will do it. But what that ends up being is you have a bunch of individual billionaires hoarding their wealth in a system that is going to collapse, because they're making it collapse and they're not doing anything to keep the system going. And so it's going to collapse, and after it collapses, they'll have a bunch of land, right? So there'll be feudal lords and kings living in a neo-feudal structure and in a collapsed economy. And meanwhile, the Chinese are creating a 10-year plan, and then they go through the 10 years with that plan, right? They make it to the end of the 10 years. They say, okay, what did we learn over that 10-year period? What were the successes? What were the failures? And then they create another 10-year plan. And then they enact that 10-year plan and they go through, and the cycle continues that way. And because they're doing a 10-year plan, like, especially compared to Western democracies, that's a long time. 10 years is a long time. It's a decade, right? We've elected 2 new leaders. Milo. Come on. We've elected 2 new leaders by that time. We've like ousted the liberals and got the conservatives in, and then re-elected the liberals in that time. Which, when you think about it, that's incredibly disorganized. While the Chinese are like 10-year plan, and even if they put in a new president, that president is going to like look at the 10-year plan and maybe like put in different ideas or things like this. But like, they have a plan. The fact that they have a plan makes them a better society than ours. America doesn't believe in plans. We're hoping for some techno-utopian escape from our problems. That's why Musk is so rich. Yeah. And Musk's solution of get to Mars, it really taps into that, like, the same kind of bullshit. Like, it's just rapture shit, right? It's just the Christians being like, and then Jesus will come back. It's not different. It's just this, like, Jesus will come back and then we'll escape from this hellhole that we are actively creating for ourselves. And Musk's saying it's Mars is not different. It hits the same thing. And if we don't fix all the problems, the rich will be okay, and the rest of you are just losers who should just go perish quietly somewhere so the rest of us aren't bothered by your misery and poverty. Yep, which is why we need to take to the streets. North America is an experiment as well, though, but now it's becoming a global experiment. Yeah. You're right about this, that North America is an experiment, that its democracy is what American democracy really showed everyone very quickly is that you do want a democratic structure in your society. That irregardless of how it failed or what its failures were, you do want a democratic structure in your society. It's better to have a democratic structure in your society than to not have one. and if only to act as a lightning rod for political discussion and for political action, right? Like yesterday I was talking to somebody like, imagine living under Doug Ford, except Doug Ford's the king and he'll be that way until he dies. Like, fuck. That's a different, we're having different conversations. And yeah, I do think like the North American experiment of governance, like, imagine a world where FDR's New Deal came in and you had like the big socialism surge throughout the 60s and the 70s. And then once Reaganism started to come in, imagine that group of people went, no. This trickle-down economics idea, this Reaganism idea, this Thatcher idea, no, none of that sounds right. That's not how anything actually works. No. And imagine if it failed, right? Imagine if that upswell of neoliberalism failed, right? We'd be living in a much different situation. Yeah. A mistake is not a mistake. A mistake is an error until you no longer are willing to fix it. Then it's a mistake, right? So people make errors, right? And it's acceptable to make errors, but unless you're willing to fix them, that's when it becomes a mistake. Okay, guys, we're getting to the end of this one. Another very successful, as far as I'm concerned. I think I had less viewers on this one than I have in the last couple, but I think the nice weather also coupled with people will start to settle in and know I'm there, right? I think the first couple, they were just like, oh, it's this guy, he's on, let's see, oh my goodness. But lots of new people came in, all this kind of stuff. Please tell your friends, please tell your neighbors, like spread this around, show me to people, let people know I exist. Like the video, share the video, comment on the video, do anything you can to get more eyeballs on it. This channel is growing. It's steadily trickling in. I'm going to hit 500 soon. That could happen as early as tomorrow if things go well, you know. What am I at? Like 482 at the moment. And so I could hit 500 pretty quickly. And oh boy. I feel like this channel has it in it to become something serious, but that's honestly, that's up to you guys. Really is. As always, I got a highlight in the description. There is my podcast, The Socialist Agenda, which we should have another one up this weekend. I've got. Please go to thecanadiancommie.com and bookmark that page. In case YouTube takes me down, I want a place to be able to put stuff. Yeah, some of you are already dropping off. You guys are doing great out there, man. Like, you're doing wonderful stuff. You're beautiful. You're making good decisions for yourself. All this world is crazy, eh? We're living in crazy places. Please keep doing your best. Keep spreading love around. Yeah, I'm probably going to close this one down 5 minutes early. That's fine. You guys are all doing great out there, okay? You keep doing good work. I'll see you later. Tomorrow, I hope. Same time. Go enjoy your lives. Good luck. We're going to need it.